They thought it would be hilarious, setting up a disabled woman on a blind date just to watch the man run. But when Jake Turner walked into that cafe, bouquet in hand, nobody expected what happened next. What started as a cruel prank became the story that shattered the internet and exposed a secret that would change everything. This is the true story of deception, dignity, and the CEO nobody saw coming. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lumiere Café, casting golden rectangles across the marble floor. It was the kind of place where cappuccinos cost more than most people's lunch, where the air smelled of imported coffee beans and expensive perfume, where people came not just to drink, but to be seen. In the back corner, partially hidden behind a decorative indoor olive tree, sat Nora Lane. She'd been there for 20 minutes, her wheelchair positioned at an angle that gave her a clear view of the entrance. Her hands rested motionlessly in her lap, fingers interlaced, knuckles slightly pale from the pressure she was applying without realizing it. She wore a cream-colored blouse that she'd changed 3 times that morning, paired with tailored navy pants that her assistant had helped her select. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time on it, which now felt foolish. This was a mistake. She'd known it the moment she agreed. 20 feet away, clustered around a different table like vultures around carrion, sat the people who'd orchestrated this entire charade. Brittany Chen, her perfectly highlighted hair catching the light as she whispered to the others. Marcus Webb, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the cruelty in his eyes as he held up his phone, camera ready. And Sarah Kim, who'd been Nora's college roommate once, back when they'd both been different people, back before the accident that had changed everything. "Do you think he'll actually show?" Brittany's voice carried just enough for Nora to hear, though she pretended not to. "I mean, when Dave told him about her, he must have known." "Dave didn't tell him everything," Marcus said with a smirk that made Nora's stomach turn. "Just said she was going through a hard time. Generic enough to be believable." Sarah laughed, a sound that once upon a time had meant friendship and late-night conversations, but now felt like broken glass. "The look on his face is going to be priceless. I almost feel bad. Almost." "Don't," Brittany said, checking her makeup in her phone's camera. "It's not like we're hurting anyone, it's just a joke. Besides, Nora needs to face reality. Not everyone is going to want to—" "To what?" Nora had rolled closer without them noticing, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through their laughter. "Finish that sentence, Brittany." The 3 of them startled like children caught stealing cookies. For a moment, genuine discomfort flickered across their faces before the masks slid back into place. "Nora!" Sarah's voice was too bright, too forced. "We were just saying how great you look. That blouse is really your color." "I heard what you were saying." Nora's hands had moved to her wheels, ready to leave, to spare herself this humiliation. "I don't know why I thought this time would be different." "Oh, come on," Marcus said, leaning back with an ease that came from never having to worry about anything. "It's just for fun. Live a little. When was the last time you even went on a date?" The question hung in the air like smoke. When was the last time? Before the accident, certainly. Before the day that had split her life into before and after. Before she'd become this person she barely recognized, this woman in a wheelchair who people either pitied or ignored, who'd learned to read the subtle shifts in strangers' eyes when they first saw her. The quick assessment, the decision about whether she was worth their time. "That's what I thought," Marcus continued when she didn't answer. "Look, maybe this guy will surprise you. Maybe he'll be cool about it." "And if he's not?" Nora asked quietly. "Then what? You get your laugh, your video to share, and I get another reminder that this," she gestured to her wheelchair, "defines everything about how people see me?" Brittany had the grace to look away. Sarah studied her manicured nails. Only Marcus held her gaze, and what Nora saw there wasn't quite cruelty but something perhaps worse. Indifference. "He's here," someone whispered urgently. All heads turned toward the entrance, where the door had just opened, bringing with it a gust of autumn air and the man who was about to become the unwitting centerpiece of their entertainment. Jake Turner didn't look like he belonged in Lumiere Café. That was Nora's first thought as she watched him pause just inside the entrance. his eyes adjusting to the softer indoor light. He wore a gray work shirt with Turner Repairs embroidered over the pocket, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars and new grease stains that he'd tried unsuccessfully to scrub away. His jeans were clean but faded, his boots practical rather than fashionable. In his hands, held with unexpected gentleness, was a small bouquet of mixed flowers. Nothing expensive or ostentatious, just daisies and baby's breath wrapped in simple paper. He was perhaps 40, with brown hair that was starting to gray at the temples and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though at this moment he looked nervous. He scanned the cafe with the uncertain expression of someone who knew he was out of his depth, but was determined not to show it. Nora felt something unexpected. Sympathy. He was being set up just as much as she was. "Oh my God," Brittany whispered, barely containing her glee. "Dave actually got him to come. This is going to be amazing." Jake's eyes continued their sweep of the room. They passed over Brittany's table without interest, lingered for a moment on an older couple sharing a dessert, then moved to the back corner where their eyes met. Nora saw it happen in real time. The moment of recognition, "You must be my date," followed immediately by the moment of realization, "Oh, she's in a wheelchair." She'd seen this sequence so many times she could have choreographed it. Usually came next, the brief widening of eyes, the fractional step backward, the mental recalculation. Then either an awkward retreat, or almost worse, the descent into exaggerated sympathy, the verbal tiptoeing, the whole interaction colored by his perception of her as tragic, broken, less than. She prepared herself for it, her spine straightening, her chin lifting in the defensive posture she'd perfected over the past 3 years. But Jake Turner did something that caught her completely off guard. He smiled, not the pitying smile she'd learned to despise, not the uncomfortable grimace of someone trapped by politeness, just a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes and made the worry lines there crease in a way that suggested this was their natural position. Then he walked toward her, not hesitantly, not reluctantly, but with the straightforward purpose of someone approaching a person he was genuinely pleased to meet. Behind their decorative tree, Brittany whispered urgently into her phone, "Are you getting this?" Jake seemed oblivious to their surveillance as he stopped a respectful distance from Nora's table. Up close, she could see that his gray eyes were kind, that there was a small scar above his left eyebrow, that his hands, despite being work-roughened, held those simple flowers with unexpected care. "Hi," he said, and his voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a slight rasp that suggested he'd spent his day talking over the sound of machinery. "I'm Jake. You must be Nora." She found herself unable to speak for a moment, thrown off balance by the complete absence of the reactions she'd been steeling herself against. Finally, she managed, "That's me. Hi. These are for you." He offered the bouquet, then seemed to realize she might have difficulty taking them from a standing position. Without making a production of it, without drawing attention to the adjustment, he simply shifted to place them gently on the table beside her, angled so she could see them. Nothing fancy, but the woman at the flower shop said daisies mean new beginnings, which seemed appropriate for a first date. Though if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I entirely trust her expertise given that she also tried to sell me something called a relationship succulent, which I'm 90% sure she made up. Despite herself, despite the situation, despite everything, Nora laughed. A real laugh. Surprised out of her, and she saw something lighten in Jake's expression. Relief, maybe, or simple pleasure at having made her smile. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please," she said, and watched as he settled himself with the comfortable ease of someone unbothered by the optics of the moment. No performative chivalry, no obvious discomfort. He just sat down like this was exactly where he wanted to be. From their hidden vantage point, Nora could hear Brittany's whispered commentary. "Okay, so he didn't run. Give it 5 minutes. Once he realizes what he's actually dealing with." "So," Jake said, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe a smudge of grease from his thumb. "I should probably apologize up front. My buddy Dave set this up, and he has an unfortunate tendency to oversell me. Whatever he told you, I can promise you I'm about 30% less interesting and 40% more likely to have machinery grease somewhere on my person at any given moment. Case in point." He gestured to the handkerchief with a self-deprecating grin. Nora found herself leaning forward slightly. The handkerchief wasn't just functional, it was clearly handmade, with uneven stitches and what looked like a motto embroidered in multicolored thread, the letters wobbling but earnest. Strong hearts walk farther. That's beautiful, she said without thinking. Did you make it? God, no. My stitching looks like a drunk spider designed it. My daughter made it for me. Mia. She's 9, and she's recently discovered embroidery, which means everything I own now has some kind of inspirational phrase on it. Last week she added "Dream Big" to my work pants. My crew hasn't stopped giving me grief about it. You have a daughter. It wasn't a question, but Jake nodded anyway. Yeah, best thing that ever happened to me, even if she does use me as a canvas for cross-stitch motivation. His smile turned softer, more private. Her mom passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. So it's just been me and Mia figuring things out together. Some days we're better at it than others, but we manage. The casual honesty of it disarmed her completely. No evasion, no careful editing of his life to seem more appealing. Just the truth, offered simply, the way someone might mention the weather. I'm sorry about your wife, Nora said quietly. Thank you. It was the hardest thing we've ever been through. But Mia, she's stronger than I ever could have imagined, resilient in a way that sometimes breaks my heart because no kid should have to be that resilient, you know? He paused, seeming to catch himself. Sorry, Dave warned me I have a tendency to overshare about Mia. She's my favorite topic. Don't apologize. It's nice. And it was. There was something refreshing about his willingness to be vulnerable, to present himself as something other than the smooth, polished version people usually brought to first dates. A waiter appeared with menus, his eyes barely flickering over Nora's wheelchair before addressing his questions pointedly to Jake, as if she couldn't speak for herself. It was a subtle slight, one that happened so often Nora had stopped correcting it. But Jake noticed. I'm sorry, he said to the waiter with unfailing politeness, but I think you meant to hand the menu to my date first. He reached across and took both menus, handing one directly to Nora before taking his own. Thank you. The waiter flushed, mumbled an apology, and retreated. It had taken perhaps 10 seconds, but in that brief exchange, something shifted in Nora's chest. Not pity, not even chivalry exactly, just respect. Simple, uncommon respect. So, Jake said, oblivious to the magnitude of what he'd just done, Dave said you work downtown. What do you do? Nora hesitated. This was usually where things got complicated. She could see Brittany's table from the corner of her eye, phone still raised, waiting for the moment when Jake would learn who she really was. But something about his genuine interest, about the way he'd treated her so far like she was simply a person he'd come to meet, made her want to preserve this moment of normalcy just a little longer. I work in corporate management, she said, which was technically true if you considered CEO a management position. It's demanding, long hours, high stress, not always rewarding, but it has its moments. I can relate to the long hours part, though I'd imagine corporate management is a bit different from crawling under sinks and rewiring breaker boxes. He studied the menu without really seeing it. Can I ask you something, and please tell me if I'm overstepping? Here it comes, Nora thought. The question about her wheelchair, about what happened, about whether it's permanent or if she's getting better. All the invasive questions strangers felt entitled to ask, as if her disability made her public property. Sure, she said, bracing herself. What made you agree to this blind date? Because, honestly, if my friends tried to set me up right now, I'd tell them exactly where they could put their good intentions. So either you're more trusting than I am, or... He trailed off, watching her with those steady gray eyes. Or maybe there's a story there. It was so completely not the question she'd expected that Nora found herself answering honestly. I guess I hoped... She stopped, unsure how to continue without revealing too much. After my accident, a lot of people in my life started treating me differently, like I'd become this fragile thing that might shatter if they weren't careful. I thought maybe meeting someone new, someone who didn't know me before, might be different, might be normal. She immediately regretted the admission. It was too much, too vulnerable for someone she'd known for less than 10 minutes, but Jake just nodded slowly, understanding passing across his features. After Sarah, that's my wife, after she died, People did the same thing to me. Everything became about the tragedy. Like I wasn't Jake anymore, I was the widower. Every conversation started with these pitying looks and careful voices. I wanted to scream at them that I was still me, still here, still capable of laughing without feeling guilty. He met her eyes. So yeah, I get wanting normal. Normal is underrated. From their surveillance post, Nora heard Marcus's voice, louder than he probably intended. This is taking too long. When is he going to bail? Maybe he feels sorry for her, Sarah suggested. But Jake was still talking, leaning back in his chair with the ease of someone settling in for a proper conversation. Mia has this theory that people are like buildings. You know what the strongest part of any building is? It's not the walls or the roof. It's the foundation, the part nobody sees. After Sarah died, I was so focused on holding up the walls, on making everything look okay from the outside, that I forgot about the foundation. Mia reminded me. She said, and I swear this is a direct quote from my 9-year-old, "Daddy, we need to be strong in the invisible parts." She sounds wise beyond her years, Nora said softly. Terrifyingly so. Last week she asked me if I thought love was renewable or finite. I'm still not sure how to answer that one. He paused as the waiter returned for their order. Jake ordered coffee and a sandwich he clearly didn't particularly want, then looked at Nora expectantly. She ordered as well, hyper-aware of Brittany's table, of their watching eyes, of the cameras she knew were still recording. This moment would be online within hours. She could already imagine the comments, the shares, the inevitable distortions of whatever narrative someone wanted to spin. But sitting across from Jake, watching the late afternoon light catch in his graying hair, listening to him talk about his daughter with such unguarded affection, she found it harder to care about what happened after. Right now, in this moment, she was just a woman on a date with a man who seemed to actually see her. "Can I ask about your daughter's motto?" She gestured to the handkerchief, which he'd left on the table between them. "Strong hearts walk farther." That's not just cute embroidery, that means something. Jake picked up the handkerchief, running his thumb over the uneven stitches with obvious affection. After Sarah died, Mia went through a phase where she didn't want to walk anywhere. Not couldn't, wouldn't. She said walking felt too far away from the house, like if we went too far we might forget Sarah was still there, in our memories and photos, and the way certain rooms still smelled like her perfume. His voice had gone quieter, more intimate. Nora leaned forward instinctively. "So I told her a story," Sarah used to tell, about how love isn't a place you visit. It's something you carry. Your heart is strong enough to carry it as far as you need to go. And Mia, she latched onto that idea. Within a week, she was embroidering these handkerchiefs for both of us. Strong hearts walk farther. It was her way of saying she was ready to keep moving forward, even though moving forward felt like leaving Sarah behind. Nora felt something break open in her chest, that careful wall she'd built to protect herself from exactly this kind of connection. "That's beautiful," she whispered, "and devastating, but beautiful." "That pretty much sums up grief," Jake said with a sad smile. "Beautiful and devastating, often at the same time." Their coffee arrived, providing a natural pause. Nora used it to study Jake more carefully. There was something unguarded about him, an openness that felt both rare and risky in her world. In her daily life, the part she hadn't told him about yet, people approach conversations like chess matches, every word calculated for advantage, every vulnerability a potential weakness to exploit. Jake Turner didn't seem to know how to play that game, or maybe he simply refused to. "Can I ask what happened?" Jake said suddenly. "With your accident? I mean, only if you want to talk about it. Dave mentioned you'd been through something difficult, but he was characteristically vague, which, knowing Dave, means he either doesn't know the details or he's being uncharacteristically tactful." Nora appreciated that he'd asked directly rather than dancing around it. "Car accident. 3 years ago. A truck ran a red light and T-boned my car on the driver's side, crushed my spine. Doctors said I'd never walk again." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she'd learned to present her trauma, a simple biography rather than ongoing grief. "Jesus," Jake breathed. "And these people." He glanced toward Brittany's table, and Nora realized with a start that he'd been aware of their surveillance all along. "They thought it would be funny to set you up on a date to watch you get hurt again?" The quiet fury in his voice caught her off guard. "You know about them." Hard not to notice three people very obviously filming us and poorly pretending not to. I figured they were your friends, which... He stopped himself, visibly choosing his words carefully. Which means either they have a terrible sense of humor or they're not actually your friends. Probably both, Nora admitted. The relief of someone else seeing it, naming it, was almost dizzying. They were my friends. Before. Now they're... I don't know what they are. People who stuck around out of obligation, maybe. Or guilt. Or just morbid curiosity about how the mighty have fallen. The mighty? Nora realized her mistake. I just mean, before the accident, I was different. More independent. More... everything. Now I'm the broken friend they feel obligated to include while secretly wishing they didn't have to. It was Jake's turn to lean forward, his gray eyes intense in a way that made her unable to look away. Can I tell you something? And I know we just met, so maybe I don't have the right to say this, but I'm going to anyway. She nodded, barely breathing. You're not broken. His voice was gentle but firm. I've spent the last 40 minutes talking to you, and not once have I thought, this woman is less than she was. I've thought this woman is funny, and this woman has kind eyes, and this woman has been through hell and came out the other side. But broken? No. A wheelchair doesn't make you broken any more than my work boots make me uneducated, or Mia's embroidered messages make me less of a man. Nora felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of Brittany's cameras, would not give them that satisfaction. Thank you, she managed. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Then the people in your life aren't saying it enough. From their table, Brittany's voice carried again. Okay, this is actually getting weird. Is he for real, or is he, trying to be noble before he ghosts her? Marcus laughed. Give it time. Reality always sets in. But reality, at least in this moment, seemed to be working against their expectations. Jake and Nora had fallen into an easy rhythm, the conversation flowing from topic to topic with the surprising compatibility of old friends rather than new acquaintances. He told her about the time Mia tried to fix his truck with her toy toolkit and somehow actually improved the radio reception. She shared a carefully edited version of her work challenges, describing the politics of her office without revealing the scale of it. An hour passed, then another. The cafe around them slowly emptied as late afternoon stretched toward evening. Neither seemed to notice. What's the best part of your job? Jake asked, stealing a fry from the plate they were somehow now sharing, despite having ordered separately. Nora considered the question. In her real job as CEO of Lane Corp, a commercial real estate empire worth billions, the honest answer would be power or influence, or the satisfaction of building something lasting. But sitting here, pretending to be just another corporate manager, she found herself reaching for a different truth. The moments when you actually help someone, she said slowly. My company works with a lot of different organizations, and sometimes I get to see how the decisions I make ripple outward. A building we develop becomes someone's office. A policy I implement makes someone's job easier. It's not always obvious, and it doesn't always feel meaningful in the day-to-day grind. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, she trailed off. What about you? Honestly, fixing things. Jake grinned. I know that sounds simple, but there's something deeply satisfying about walking into a situation where nothing works and walking out having made it right again. Broken dishwasher? Fixed. Faulty wiring? Fixed. Leaky pipe? Fixed. It's straightforward in a way most of life isn't. You know what the problem is, you know what the solution is, and when you're done, you can see the results immediately. I envy that clarity, Nora admitted. Most of my problems don't have clear solutions. Like sitting in a cafe being secretly filmed by people who are supposed to care about you? The bluntness of it made her laugh despite herself. Yes, exactly like that. Jake's expression sobered. For what it's worth, I think they're the ones who are broken, not you. It takes a special kind of cruelty to turn someone's vulnerability into entertainment. They'd say they were helping, pushing me out of my comfort zone, making me face reality. That's what cruel people always say when they're called out. Jake finished his coffee, his hands wrapped around the cup even though it must have gone cold by now. Real help looks like showing up when someone needs you. Listening without trying to fix everything, treating someone with dignity especially when the rest of the world doesn't. Is that what you think you're doing? Nora asked quietly. Treating me with dignity? I'm treating you like a person I'm genuinely enjoying spending time with, which happens to be true. He met her eyes. I came here today nervous as hell, convinced Dave had oversold me, and I'd somehow disappoint you. I didn't come here to be noble or prove anything. I just came hoping to have a decent conversation with someone new. And instead I got... He gestured between them. This, whatever this is, it's been the best afternoon I've had in longer than I can remember. The sincerity in his voice was almost painful. Nora had spent 3 years surrounded by people who either pitied her or used her, who saw her wheelchair before they saw her, who made every interaction about her limitations rather than her capabilities. And here was this mechanic in a work shirt, with grease under his fingernails and his daughter's embroidery in his pocket, treating her like she was simply a woman worth knowing. Jake, she started, then stopped, unsure what she wanted to say. That this had been extraordinary, that she hadn't felt this scene in years, that she was terrified of what would happen when he learned the full truth about who she was. Before she could find the words, a commotion erupted from Brittany's table. Marcus had stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," he announced loudly enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Nora, seriously? You're really going to sit there and pretend this is real?" Every head in the cafe turned. Nora felt her face flush hot with humiliation and anger. This was it. The moment they'd been waiting for, when they could expose the situation and humiliate them both. But Jake was already standing, his movement calm but purposeful. He didn't look angry, just deeply disappointed in a way that was somehow worse. "I'm sorry," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "But who are you, and why do you think you're part of this conversation?" Marcus faltered slightly, clearly not expecting to be directly confronted. "I'm her friend, and you're just some guy Dave found. This whole thing is a joke." "A joke," Jake repeated slowly, like he was testing the weight of the word. "You orchestrated a situation where someone you claim to care about would be publicly humiliated. You filmed it without her consent, and you think calling it a joke makes it okay. It was supposed to be funny. She'd see the guy's face when he realized." Marcus stopped, seeming to realize he was revealing too much. "When he realized what? That she uses a wheelchair?" Jake's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "I'm confused about what part of that was supposed to be funny. Could you explain it to me? Slowly, so I can understand." Brittany jumped in, her voice too bright. "It's not like that. We were trying to help Nora get back out there. She's been hiding herself away since the accident, and we thought..." "You thought you'd force her into a humiliating situation and film it for your entertainment," Jake finished. "That's not help. That's cruelty dressed up in concern." Sarah finally spoke, and there was something genuine in her voice, guilt maybe, or shame. "We didn't mean for it to go like this. We thought you'd react differently, that you'd be uncomfortable, or I'd run?" Jake asked quietly. "You set this up hoping I'd take one look at Nora and leave, so you could comfort her afterward and tell her, 'See, this is reality. This is what you should expect?'" He shook his head slowly. "That says a lot more about all of you than it does about her. She needs to face reality," Marcus insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. "Not everyone is going to want to deal with..." "With what?" Jake cut him off, and now there was real anger in his voice. "With a person? Because that's what she is. A person. Not a punchline, not a project, not whatever twisted thing you've turned her into in your minds to justify treating her this way." The cafe was completely silent now. Even the staff had stopped what they were doing to watch. Nora sat frozen, torn between mortification that this private moment had become a public spectacle and something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I'm not pitying her," Jake continued, addressing the room now rather than just Marcus. "I'm admiring her. Do you know what it takes to survive something that could have killed you, to rebuild your life from scratch, and to still show up for a blind date arranged by people you thought were your friends? That's not weakness. That's not something that needs pity. That's strength. That's courage. And if you three can't see that, then you're the ones who should be pitied. The words hung in the air like a bell that had been rung, the sound of it still vibrating through the space. Brittany's phone had slipped from her hand. Sarah was crying silently. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Jake turned back to Nora, his expression softening. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make a scene, but I couldn't just sit there and let them... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. You deserve better than this. Than them. Nora felt like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. This stranger who'd walked into what should have been a joke and instead treated her with more genuine respect than people who'd known her for years. She wanted to tell him everything. About Lane Corp, about her real position, about the power she wielded in boardrooms and the powerlessness she felt in moments like this. But the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she said simply, "Thank you. You have no idea what it means that you said that." I meant every word. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. Behind them, Brittany and her group were gathering their things, the entertainment value of the situation having evaporated into something uncomfortable and exposing. As they prepared to leave, Sarah approached the table, her mascara smudged from crying. Nora, She stopped, seeming to realize there was nothing she could say that would make this right. I'm sorry, we were wrong. So wrong. Yeah, Nora said quietly. You were. Sarah left without another word. The cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, conversations resuming, the staff moving again. But something had fundamentally shifted. Nora could feel it in the way other patrons were looking at her now, not with pity, but with respect. Or maybe curiosity, or maybe just recognition that they'd witnessed something real in a place usually defined by performance. Jake sat back down, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The bouquet of daisies sat between them, a reminder of how this had started, with simple flowers and the promise of new beginnings. I should probably apologize for the scene, Jake said eventually. I'm not typically someone who makes speeches in public spaces. Don't apologize. Please. Nora reached across the table without thinking, her hand covering his. The physical contact surprised them both, but neither pulled away. What you did, what you said, that was the most honest anyone's been with me in 3 years, including myself. His hand turned under hers, his palm warm and calloused against her fingers. Then I'm not sorry. The light outside had shifted into the golden hour, that brief window when everything looked softer, more forgiving. Through the window, Nora could see people passing by on the sidewalk, some hurrying, some strolling, all of them living their own stories, facing their own challenges, carrying their own invisible burdens. Can I ask you something? Nora said, her hand still in his, and you have to promise to answer honestly. Okay. Why are you really still here? After everything that just happened, after finding out you were set up, after watching my so-called friends implode in public, why are you still sitting at this table? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same care he'd brought to everything else that afternoon. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. Because in the 2 hours I've been sitting here, I've laughed more than I have in months. Because you're smart and funny and you challenge me in ways I didn't expect. Because your eyes light up when you talk about work, even though you're trying to act like it's boring. Because when you smile, really smile, not that polite version you put on, it's like watching the sun come out. He paused. And because I came here hoping to meet someone interesting, and I did. Everything else, the setup, your so-called friends, the cameras, that's just noise. But this? He squeezed her hand gently. This feels real. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. It made terrifying, wonderful, impossible sense. Jake, there's something I need to tell you, Nora started, finally ready to reveal the truth about who she really was, about Lane Corp and her position and everything she'd been holding back. But Jake's phone buzzed insistently against the table. He glanced at it and winced. I'm so sorry. That's Mia's school. I have to take this. He answered, and Nora watched his expression shift from concern to understanding to the particular kind of patience that came from experience. Uh-huh. Right. Did she remember to carry the one? No, that's the problem. Division, not multiplication. Can you put her on? There was a brief pause, then his voice softened even more. Hey, Bug, what's this I hear about math trauma? I know, fractions are cruel and unusual punishment. Tell Miss Hendricks I said so, because Miss Hendricks gives me that look that means she thinks I'm being a bad influence, that's why. He was smiling as he said it. Listen, I'm going to be home in about 20 minutes. We'll tackle it together, okay? With ice cream. Yes, even on a Tuesday. This situation calls for ice cream. Love you too, Bug. He hung up and turned back to Nora with an apologetic smile. Math emergency. Apparently fractions are the work of the devil and only ice cream can combat them. You should go, Nora finished, trying not to let her disappointment show. Your daughter needs you. She does. Jake stood, then hesitated. This was really special, Nora. I'd like to see you again. If you'd like that too? She should tell him. Right now, before he left, before this went any further. Should explain about Lane Corp, about who she really was, about the vast gulf between his world and hers. Should prepare him for what he'd be walking into if they actually tried to make this something more than a single afternoon. But looking at him standing there in his work shirt, his daughter's embroidered handkerchief visible in his pocket, his gray eyes warm and hopeful, she found herself saying simply, I'd like that very much. Good. His smile was brilliant. How do I reach you? They exchanged phone numbers, the mundane practicality of it somehow more intimate than anything that had come before. This meant possibility. This meant tomorrow and the day after, and the risk of building something beyond this single, perfect afternoon. At the cafe entrance, Jake paused and turned back. Hey, Nora? Yeah? Strong hearts walk farther, he said, touching the handkerchief in his pocket. Just so you know, yours is one of the strongest I've ever met. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Nora alone in the cafe with a bouquet of daisies, a phone number in her contacts, and the strange, terrifying feeling that her carefully controlled life had just spun completely off its axis. She picked up one of the daisies, twirling it slowly between her fingers. New beginnings, Jake had said. The flower shop woman claimed daisies meant new beginnings. Outside the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Nora sat in that golden light, in that too-expensive cafe where she'd come expecting humiliation and found something else entirely. She wasn't naive enough to think this would be simple. There were still revelations to come, truths to share, obstacles to overcome. Jake didn't know who she really was. Didn't know about the empire she'd built, the power she wielded, the vast distance between his world of machinery grease and repair calls and her world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. But he'd seen her. Really seen her. Not the wheelchair. Not the CEO. Not the tragedy or the triumph. Just her. Nora Lane. A woman who'd survived something that should have destroyed her and was still here. Still hoping. Still willing to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world held more kindness than cruelty. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Made it home. Mia wanted me to tell you she thinks daisies are a good choice because they're happy flowers. She also wanted to know if you like ice cream, because apparently that's how we judge people now. Jake. Nora found herself laughing, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. Tell Mia I'm a chocolate chip cookie dough advocate. Does this mean I passed the test? The response came quickly. She says you're approved but reserves the right to change her mind if you turn out to prefer vanilla. Apparently we have standards in this house. They texted back and forth as the cafe staff began their closing routines around her. Nothing deep or significant, just the easy banter of two people enjoying each other's company, even at a distance. It felt normal in a way Nora had almost forgotten existed. Finally, she gathered her things, the flowers carefully balanced on her lap, and made her way out of Lumiere Café. The evening air was cool against her face, carrying the scent of autumn and possibility. She didn't know what would happen when Jake learned the truth. Didn't know if what had felt so real in that cafe could survive the harsh light of her actual life. Didn't know if a mechanic with a 9-year-old daughter and a woman who ran a corporate empire had any business trying to build something together. But as she made her way home through the city streets, the daisies bright against her lap, Nora found herself thinking about Jake's words. Strong hearts walk farther. She'd walked farther than anyone thought possible. From the hospital bed where they'd told her she'd never walk again. From the wheelchair that had become her reality. From the friends who'd turned into strangers, and the life that had shattered into something unrecognizable. She'd walked farther than that. And maybe, just maybe, she could walk farther still. Even if it meant walking into uncertainty. Even if it meant risking her heart after 3 years of keeping it safely locked away. Even if it meant believing that somewhere in this complicated, often cruel world, there was space for simple kindness, for genuine connection, for the possibility that new beginnings weren't just something flower shops made up to sell daisies. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Jake. Mia wants to know your last name. Says she needs to do a full background check because she's protective of her dad. I told her that's slightly creepy, but she insists it's responsible parenting. I may have created a monster. Nora's fingers hovered over her phone. This was the moment. She could tell him now. Lane. Nora Lane. Yes, that Lane. Of Lane Corp. The CEO you've probably seen in the business section of the newspaper. Instead, she typed, Tell Mia she can have 3 questions, and I promise to answer honestly. That seems like a fair background check. She says, 1. What's your favorite color? 2. Do you like dogs? 3. Are you nice to my daddy? Nora smiled, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Blue. I love dogs. And yes, I try to be very nice to your daddy. She says you pass. Welcome to the inner circle. It's small but loyal. The text stopped there, presumably because Jake had been pulled into the complicated world of fractions and ice cream that awaited him at home. Nora sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, watching the cafe lights through the windshield. Inside, the staff was finishing their closing routine, wiping down tables, stacking chairs. In a few hours, someone would open that same cafe to a new day, new customers, new stories. The table where she and Jake had sat would be occupied by someone else, living their own complicated narrative. But for this one afternoon, that table had been theirs. That space had held something real and rare and worth protecting. Nora started the car and pulled into traffic, the daisies in the passenger seat beside her like a promise, like hope, like the possibility that sometimes, just sometimes, the people we meet by accident turn out to be exactly who we needed to find. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know how to reconcile the woman she'd been in that cafe with the CEO she'd be again come Monday morning. Didn't know if Jake would still look at her the same way once he knew the full truth. But tonight, driving through the city with happy flowers beside her and a mechanic's daughter's approval in her phone, Nora Lane allowed herself to believe in new beginnings. Even if they came wrapped in simple paper and cost less than the coffee they'd shared. Especially then. The weekend passed in a blur of text messages and stolen moments between Jake's repair calls and Nora's carefully maintained silence about her real identity. Saturday morning brought a photo of Mia's latest embroidery project, a lopsided heart with the words, "Be brave," stitched in purple thread. Saturday afternoon, Nora sent back a picture of the daisies, now in a vase on her kitchen counter, still fresh and defiant against wilting. Sunday evening, Jake called instead of texting, his voice warm and slightly tired. Mia's finally asleep. She spent 2 hours today trying to teach me embroidery. I have 3 puncture wounds and a newfound respect for anyone who can make a straight line with a needle. Nora laughed, curled up on her couch in the penthouse apartment Jake didn't know she owned, overlooking the city he navigated in his repair truck. How bad is it? I made something that might be a dog. Or a cloud. Mia insists it's abstract art, which I think is her polite way of saying it's terrible. He paused, and she could hear the smile in his voice. She wants to meet you. The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. She does? Yeah. I told her it might be too soon, that we've only been on 1 date, but she gave me this look. You know the look kids give you when they think you're being ridiculous? That one. She said, and I quote, "Daddy, if she makes you smile at your phone like that, I should probably meet her before you do something embarrassing." I make you smile at your phone? Constantly. It's becoming a problem. Yesterday I was under a sink and the homeowner asked if I was okay because I kept grinning like an idiot. I had to pretend I'd found the problem when really I was just reading your text about that meeting where someone called a PowerPoint presentation a visual journey. Nora's chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to joy and guilt in equal measure. She should tell him. Right now, over the phone, before this went any further, should explain that she wasn't just some corporate manager, that meeting his daughter meant entering his life under false pretenses. Jake, she started, her voice more serious. There's something I need to tell you about my job. Mom, Daddy, there's a spider. Jake's attention split instantly. I'm sorry, that's Mia. She has a complicated relationship with spiders that involves a lot of yelling and requiring parental intervention. Can I call you back? Of course. Go rescue your daughter. Or rescue the spider for my daughter. It's honestly 50-50 at this point. He hung up, and Nora sat in the sudden silence of her apartment, her confession still unspoken, hanging in the air like smoke. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Lane Corp building downtown, its logo illuminated against the night sky. Tomorrow morning, she'd be back in that building, back in the role of CEO, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd met a mechanic in a cafe and couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd defended her, the way he'd seen past her wheelchair to the person underneath, the way his daughter apparently gave him relationship advice with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Crisis averted. Spider relocated safely outside. Mia says I'm a hero. I'm choosing to believe her. Call you tomorrow? Definitely. But Monday morning brought complications that had nothing to do with Jake Turner and everything to do with the secret she was keeping from him. Nora arrived at Lane Corp headquarters at 7:30, wheeling through the executive entrance where security nodded respectfully. The building was hers. Well, technically the company's, but she'd designed this space, had fought the board for wider hallways and accessible features that went beyond legal minimums. Now it served as a model, though few people knew the CEO herself had been the driving force behind those changes. Her assistant, Margaret, met her at the elevator with coffee and a worried expression. We have a problem. Good morning to you too, Margaret. Sorry, good morning. You look happy. That's new. Margaret fell into step beside her as they moved toward Nora's office. But seriously, we have a situation. The Riverside Development Project, the one where we're supposed to break ground next month? Nora's good mood evaporated. Riverside was her pet project, a mixed-use development that would include accessible housing and community spaces. She'd put 2 years into the planning. What kind of situation? The contractors found structural issues with the existing buildings. The whole timeline is in jeopardy. The board is already talking about scrapping it or scaling back the accessibility features to save costs. Of course they were. Nora wheeled into her office, the familiar weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders like a coat she couldn't take off. Schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon, and get me the engineering reports, all of them. Margaret nodded and disappeared, leaving Nora alone in her office with its carefully curated mix of professional achievement and personal emptiness. Photos of buildings she'd developed, awards from organizations she'd helped, a framed copy of Lane Corp's mission statement. Nothing personal, nothing that spoke to who she was beyond this role. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Morning, Mia wants to know if you're free for dinner Friday. She promises to be on her best behavior, which knowing Mia means approximately 15 minutes of politeness, followed by intense questioning. No pressure, though. I know meeting the kid is a big step. Nora stared at the message, torn between wanting to say yes and knowing she was building something on a foundation of omission. Before she could respond, her office door opened and Robert Chen walked in, board member, old family friend, and one of the few people who'd known her father. Nora, we need to talk about Riverside. I'm aware of the situation, Robert. Then you know we need to be practical about this. The accessibility features you've insisted on, they're expensive, and with these structural issues, those features are non-negotiable. Nora's voice was steel. We committed to creating housing that works for everyone, not just the able-bodied. That was the whole point of Riverside. Robert sighed, settling into the chair across from her desk. I understand your personal connection to this, but as a board member, I have to think about the bottom line. We could save millions by scaling back, and we'd be breaking promises to the community. to the people who are counting on us to follow through. Nora leaned forward. My personal connection, as you call it, doesn't make me less capable of making sound business decisions. If anything, it makes me more aware of what this project represents. I'm not questioning your capability. I'm questioning whether you're too close to this to see the practical realities. It was an old argument, one they'd had in various forms since Nora had taken over as CEO. The assumption that her wheelchair made her biased, that her personal experience was a liability rather than an asset. She'd learned to fight these battles carefully, strategically, choosing when to push and when to redirect. The practical reality, she said quietly, is that we're one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the state. We have the resources to do this right. The question isn't whether we can afford it. It's whether we have the integrity to follow through on our commitments. Robert studied her for a long moment. You're your father's daughter, stubborn as hell and twice as idealistic. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He stood to leave. I'll support you in the board meeting, but you need to have solid numbers, Nora. The other members won't be swayed by idealism alone. After he left, Nora spent the next 3 hours buried in engineering reports and cost projections, building the case she'd need to save Riverside. It was exhausting work, made more so by the knowledge that she was fighting not just structural issues, but institutional bias, the quiet assumption that accessibility was a luxury rather than a necessity. Her phone buzzed periodically with texts from Jake, photos of his morning jobs, a complicated rewiring situation, a flooded basement, the stray cat that had apparently adopted his truck as a napping spot. Each message was a small window into a life completely separate from hers, and each one made the gulf between them feel wider. At noon, Margaret appeared with lunch and another worried expression. The press got wind of the Riverside delays. We're getting calls. Of course we are. Nora rubbed her temples. Standard response? We're assessing the situation and remain committed to the project. Don't give them anything else. There's something else. Margaret hesitated. TMZ picked up that video from the café, the one where you and that mechanic. Nora's blood ran cold. What video? Apparently one of those people filming you posted it online. It went viral over the weekend. The caption is something like, "Watch this man defend disabled woman on blind date." The comments are, well, they're mostly positive, but people are starting to recognize you in the background. It's only a matter of time before someone connects the dots. This was it. The moment when her two worlds collided in the worst possible way. Jake would find out who she really was, not through her telling him, but through a viral video and media speculation. Pull it up, Nora said quietly. Margaret handed over her tablet, and Nora watched that afternoon from an outside perspective. There was Jake standing up to Marcus, his voice clear and unwavering. I'm not pitying her, I'm admiring her. There was her own face, visible in profile, showing more emotion than she'd realized she'd been displaying. And there, in the comments, were thousands of people weighing in on a moment that had felt private, intimate, real. Most comments were supportive, some were pitying, a few were cruel. But what made Nora's stomach twist was the growing thread of people asking questions. Wait, isn't that Nora Lane? Is this the Nora Lane like the CEO? Why is a billionaire on a blind date setup? How bad is it? She asked without looking up. Trending on 3 platforms. The business press is starting to pick it up. By tomorrow, everyone will know. Which meant Jake would know. Would see it not as her telling him the truth, but as him discovering she'd been lying by omission. Would think she'd been playing some kind of game, slumming with the working class for entertainment. I need to call someone, Nora said. Close the door on your way out. Margaret left, and Nora sat in the silence of her office, staring at her phone. She should call Jake. Should explain everything before he heard it from someone else. Her phone rang. Jake's name on the screen. She answered with shaking hands. Hi. Hey. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I know you're at work, but I had a lunch break and I wanted to hear your voice. He sounded happy, relaxed, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Mia's been talking about Friday non-stop. I think she's more excited about this dinner than I am, which is saying something because I'm pretty excited. Jake, Nora's voice cracked slightly. Have you been online today? Online? No, I've been elbow deep in a furnace all morning. Why? There's a video from the cafe. Someone posted it, and people are seeing it, a lot of people. A pause. Then, carefully, okay, what kind of video? When you stood up to those people. When you defended me. Someone filmed it and it went viral. Oh. Another pause, longer this time. Are you okay? I mean, I know you didn't want that moment broadcast to the world. I'm sorry if my speech made things worse. You have nothing to apologize for. Nora closed her eyes. But Jake, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you on Friday, but I wasn't ready, or I was scared, or I just wanted one afternoon where I could be normal. And now it's going to come out anyway, and you're going to think I was lying to you. Nora, breathe. His voice was calm, grounding. Whatever it is, just tell me. We'll figure it out. I'm not just a corporate manager. The words came out in a rush. I'm the CEO of Lane Corp. The woman in that cafe, the one you defended. I run a billion-dollar company. I own half the commercial real estate downtown. I'm not who you think I am. The silence that followed felt infinite. Nora could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the distant sounds of the city through her office windows, could hear everything except Jake's voice. Finally, Lane Corp. As in the Lane building? The one with the logo I see every time I drive downtown? Yes. The company that owns the Riverside project? The one that's been in the news for the Accessible Housing Initiative? Yes. Another pause. Then, to her complete surprise, Jake laughed. Not cruelly, not bitterly, just genuinely amused. Okay, wow. That's definitely bigger than corporate management. Why didn't you tell me? Because when you looked at me in that cafe, you saw me. Just me. Not my company, not my bank account, not my position. You treated me like a person, and I haven't felt like just a person in so long. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I was afraid if you knew, everything would change. Nora. Jake's voice was gentle. I'm a mechanic who drives a 15-year-old truck and still can't figure out how to get grass stains out of work pants. My daughter's idea of fine dining is when we spring for the good pizza place instead of frozen. I'm not exactly in your league here. Jake, that's not what this is about. Isn't it? You were afraid I'd treat you differently if I knew you were rich and powerful, which, fair point, a lot of people would. But Nora, I'm not interested in your bank account. I'm interested in the woman who laughed at my jokes, who talked to me about grief and loss and moving forward. That person doesn't change just because she has a corner office. Relief flooded through her so suddenly she felt dizzy. You're not angry? I'm not angry. He paused, and she could almost hear him thinking. I'm trying to process the fact that the woman I've been texting terrible jokes to runs a company I've probably done maintenance work for at some point. That's a weird feeling, but angry? No, if anything, I'm more convinced that your so-called friends are terrible people. Who sets up a CEO on a prank blind date? People who thought it would be funny to watch me fail. People who underestimated you. Jake's voice turned more serious. Here's what I'm thinking. This video thing, it's going to be weird for a while. People are going to have opinions. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change Friday, does it? You still want to have dinner with me and Mia? Because we still want to have dinner with you, CEO or not. Nora felt tears prick her eyes for the second time in 4 days. I would love to have dinner with you and Mia. Good. That's settled. Now I have to go because this furnace isn't going to fix itself, and also because I need to process the fact that I told a billionaire CEO that my idea of a good date venue is probably going to be embarrassingly beneath her standards. Jake, I'm kidding. Mostly. We'll figure it out. Call me tonight? Definitely. After they hung up, Nora sat motionless in her chair, staring at the city beyond her windows. He knew. The secret that had been eating at her for days was out, and instead of disaster there was understanding, acceptance. The same straightforward decency he'd shown in the cafe, now applied to this new, complicated information. Margaret knocked and entered without waiting. The board meeting is in an hour. Are you ready? Was she ready? To walk into that room and fight for Riverside, knowing that by tomorrow every board member would have seen the video, would have opinions about her personal life, Would question whether she was too distracted to lead, to maintain her professional composure while her private life was being dissected by strangers online? "I'm ready," Nora said, and meant it. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as she'd anticipated. 6 men and 2 women sat around the massive conference table. Financial reports spread before them like evidence at a trial. Robert Chen nodded at her as she wheeled to her place at the head of the table, but the others wore expressions ranging from concern to openly hostile. "Let's begin," Nora said, pulling up her presentation. "I've reviewed the engineering reports for Riverside, and while the structural issues are significant, they're not insurmountable. I've prepared 3 scenarios. Before we get into that," interrupted Martin Frost, the board's longest-serving member and biggest pain in Nora's side, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Here it comes, Nora thought. "There's a video circulating online," Martin continued, "showing you in what appears to be a personal situation. Some board members have expressed concern about how this reflects on Lane Corp." "My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities," Nora said evenly. "Doesn't it? You're the face of this company, Nora. When you're involved in viral videos about blind dates and disability, it raises questions about judgment, about what exactly?" Nora's voice was quiet but dangerous. "About whether a disabled woman should be allowed to have a personal life? About whether being CEO means I forfeit my right to privacy?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Martin? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds a lot like you're suggesting that my wheelchair makes me a liability to this company. That being publicly disabled, because that's what you're really concerned about, isn't it, makes me unfit to lead." The room went silent. Even Martin seemed to recognize he'd walked into a trap. "What that video shows," Nora continued, her voice steady, "is a man treating me with basic human dignity in a situation where others sought to humiliate me. If that somehow embarrasses Lane Corp, then we have much bigger problems than structural issues at Riverside." Robert cleared his throat. "I think what Martin is trying to say, poorly, is that we're concerned about distractions. The Riverside project needs your full attention." "And it has my full attention, which is why I've spent the last 6 hours developing solutions instead of worrying about internet comments." Nora pulled up her presentation. "Now, if we're done discussing my personal life, can we address the actual business at hand?" The meeting proceeded with tense efficiency. Nora presented her 3 scenarios, each one preserving the accessibility features while addressing the structural concerns through different approaches. The costs varied, but all were feasible within Lane Corp's substantial budget. "The question," she concluded, "isn't whether we can afford to do this right. It's whether we're willing to. Riverside represents more than just profit margins. It represents our values as a company, our commitment to the communities we build in. If we scale back on accessibility to save money, we're sending a message about what we really prioritize." "That's all very idealistic," Martin said, "but shareholders care about returns, not messages." "Shareholders care about sustainable growth and positive brand reputation," Nora countered, "both of which will damage if we abandon our commitments at the first sign of difficulty. The press is already watching this project. If we cut corners now, that's the story that goes viral, not some board member's concerns about my dating life." The vote, when it came, was closer than Nora would have liked. 7-3 in favor of her plan, with Martin and 2 others voting against. But it was enough. Riverside would move forward, accessibility features intact. As the board members filed out, Robert lingered. "That was well done." "Was it?" Martin looked ready to vote me out. "Martin's been looking for a reason to challenge you since you took over. Don't let him get to you." Robert paused. "For what it's worth, that video, the man defending you, he seemed genuine. Not many people like that left in the world." "No," Nora agreed softly. "There aren't." The rest of the afternoon blurred together in a series of meetings, calls, and decisions. By the time Nora finally made it home, the sun was setting and her phone was full of messages, from reporters requesting comment, from old acquaintances suddenly interested in her life, from strangers who'd seen the video and felt compelled to share their opinions. But the only message she cared about was from Jake. "Survived the day? Mia and I are making spaghetti if you want to talk. She says it's her specialty, though I should warn you her definition of specialty is loose at best." Nora called instead of texting, and Jake answered on the second ring. "Hey, how was the board meeting?" The casual question, asked with genuine interest rather than professional necessity, made something in Nora's chest loosen. Exhausting, but successful. We're moving forward with Riverside. That's the accessible housing project, right? I read about it when I was procrastinating on paperwork last week.
Seemed like a big deal. It is. It's... Nora paused, uncertain how much to share. But this was Jake, who'd already proven he could handle complicated truths. It's personal for me. After my accident, I realized how much of the world isn't built for people with disabilities. Buildings, transportation, housing, all of it designed with the assumption that everyone is able-bodied. Riverside is my attempt to change that, at least in one small corner of the city. That's not small, Nora. That's incredible. The board doesn't always see it that way. Today there were questions about whether I was too personally invested to make rational decisions. Jake was quiet for a moment. In the background, she could hear Mia singing something off-key. Can I tell you something my wife used to say? Sarah was a nurse, worked in pediatric oncology. Heartbreaking stuff. People would ask her how she could handle it, how she didn't get too emotionally involved. And she'd say, "The day I stop being emotionally involved is the day I need to find a different job." She believed that caring about people, really caring, not just professional detachment, made her better at her work, not worse. Did it? Yeah, it did. She was amazing at her job because she cared so much. Sure, it hurt more when things went wrong, but it also meant she fought harder for her patients, noticed things other people missed, showed up in ways that mattered. His voice softened. What I'm saying is, being personally invested in Riverside doesn't make you less capable of leading it. It makes you more capable of understanding what it needs to be. Nora closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. Thank you. I needed to hear that today. Anytime. Now, Mia wants to talk to you. Fair warning, she's been planning Friday's dinner all afternoon and has approximately 60 questions. There was a rustling sound. Then a young voice came on the line, higher than Nora expected, full of barely contained energy. Hi, is this Nora? I'm Mia. I'm 9. Daddy says you're coming for dinner on Friday, which is exciting because we never have fancy people over. Not that you have to be fancy. You can be regular. I'm usually regular except for church. Do you like spaghetti? I make it with sauce from a jar, but Daddy says that's okay because cooking is about love, not recipes. Do you have any food things I should know about? Like allergies, or if you hate mushrooms because I hate mushrooms and Daddy keeps trying to sneak them into things. Mia, Jake's voice in the background, amused. Breathe. I'm breathing. I'm just asking important questions. Nora found herself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time since the board meeting. Hi, Mia. It's nice to talk to you. I like spaghetti very much. I don't have any allergies, and I also hate mushrooms, so we're already on the same page. See, Daddy, I told you mushrooms were bad. Even Nora agrees. Great, now you've allied with my daughter against me, Jake said, but she could hear the laughter in his voice. I'll never win another food argument. Can I ask you something? Mia's voice had gone more serious. Daddy said you use a wheelchair. Is it the kind with motors or the kind you push yourself? Mia... Jake started to interrupt, probably worried his daughter was being too direct, but Nora cut him off. It's okay. I push myself. Sometimes it's harder than others, but I like being able to control where I go. That makes sense. My friend Emma has a wheelchair with motors because her arms don't work the same, but she says she likes it because it means she can go really fast and race people. Can your wheelchair go fast? Pretty fast, yeah. Cool. Maybe we can race sometime. I'm very competitive. Daddy says I get it from my mom. A pause, then more quietly, she died. But Daddy probably told you that. He did. I'm very sorry that happened, Mia. Thank you. It's sad, but also we have good memories, so that helps. Like how she used to sing really loud in the car, and Daddy would pretend to be embarrassed, but actually he loved it, and how she made the best chocolate chip cookies even though she always burned the first batch and said those were practice cookies, which was her way of eating cookies without feeling guilty. Nora's throat tightened. She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. Daddy says you're wonderful too, which is why I wanted to meet you, to make sure. The childish bluntness of it should have been awkward, but somehow it was just honest. So far you seem pretty nice. I'll know more on Friday. That's fair. I'll try to pass your evaluation. Okay, here's Daddy again. Bye, Nora. More rustling, then Jake was back.
Sorry about the interrogation. She's been holding those questions in all day.
Don't apologize. She's incredible, Jake. You're raising an amazing kid. I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm one disaster away from completely screwing it up. But then she says something insightful or kind, and I think maybe we're doing okay. He paused. So Friday. I should probably tell you that our apartment is nothing fancy. We're talking secondhand furniture and Mia's artwork covering every available wall space. If you're used to... Jake, Nora interrupted gently, I don't care about your furniture. I care about meeting your daughter and spending time with you. That's all. Right. Okay. Good. He sounded relieved. 6 o'clock work for you? 6 o'clock is perfect. They talked for another 30 minutes about nothing important. His day, her meeting, Mia's upcoming school project on the solar system.
Easy conversation that required no performance, no careful word choice, just two people sharing their lives in small, everyday details. When they finally hung up, Nora sat in the quiet of her penthouse and thought about the gulf between her world and Jake's. Her apartment was 3,000 square feet of carefully designed luxury. His was probably a quarter of that, filled with secondhand furniture and a 9-year-old's enthusiasm. Her days were board meetings and million-dollar decisions. His were repair calls and school pickups and trying to keep pace with a daughter who'd been forced to grow up too fast. By every logical measure, they didn't make sense together. But logic hadn't been part of the equation since Jake walked into that cafe with daisies and refused to see her as anything less than fully human. The week passed in a strange duality. At work, Nora was CEO Lane, decisive, strategic, fighting battles with board members and coordinating the Riverside reconstruction. The video continued to circulate online, spawning think pieces about disability representation and first date etiquette. The press wanted interviews, disability advocacy groups reached out for partnerships. Her public profile had never been higher. But in the evenings, after Margaret went home and the office emptied, Nora was just a woman texting with a mechanic and his precocious daughter. Mia sent her photos of dinner preparations, a hand-drawn menu featuring spaghetti as the main course. Jake sent updates on his increasingly elaborate worries about Friday being perfect. By Friday afternoon, Nora was more nervous than she'd been for any board presentation. She'd changed clothes 3 times, trying to find the balance between too formal and trying too hard to be casual. Eventually, she settled on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater. Approachable, but put together, Margaret noticed her checking her appearance in the office mirror for the 3rd time. Hot date? Dinner with Jake and his daughter. The mechanic from the video? Margaret grinned. Half the internet is shipping you to. There's fan art. There's what? Fan art. People drawing you and him as cartoon characters. It's weirdly adorable. Margaret's expression turned more serious. For what it's worth, I think he seems good for you. I've worked for you for 5 years and I've never seen you this, I don't know, present? Like you're actually living instead of just working. Is it that obvious? To someone who sees you every day? Yeah. Margaret gathered her things to leave. Have fun. And Nora, stop worrying so much. If his daughter is anything like him, she's going to love you. Nora left the office at 5:30, giving herself extra time to navigate evening traffic to Jake's apartment building in a neighborhood she'd never visited. It was older, well-maintained, but modest. The kind of place where families stayed for years because the rent was reasonable and the landlord was decent. She found parking on the street, then sat in her car for 5 minutes, gathering courage. Through the window of the building's lobby, she could see worn tile floors and a bulletin board covered in community notices. This was Jake's world, practical, unpretentious, built on different values than the one she usually inhabited. Finally, she grabbed the flowers she'd brought, daisies, a callback to their first date, and made her way inside. The elevator was old but functional, taking her slowly to the 3rd floor where Jake had said to meet him. Apartment 3C. She could hear voices inside, Jake's deeper tones and Mia's excited chatter. Nora knocked before she could talk herself out of it. The door swung open to reveal Jake in jeans and a button-down shirt he'd clearly made an effort with, his hair still damp from a shower. His face lit up when he saw her. "Hey,
"You found us! Come in! Come in!" The apartment was exactly as he'd described, small but cozy, with mismatched furniture and every wall covered in Mia's artwork. Crayon drawings of families and flowers, watercolor attempts at landscapes, embroidered pieces framed with obvious pride. The kitchen was barely separated from the living room, and something on the stove smelled genuinely good. "Nora's here," Jake called over his shoulder. "Mia, company!" A small whirlwind emerged from what must have been a bedroom. 9 years old, dark hair in a ponytail, wearing a dress she'd clearly chosen herself based on the clashing patterns. Mia stopped 3 feet from Nora, studying her with the intense focus children bring to important evaluations. "Hi," Mia said finally. "You're taller than I thought you'd be. I mean, sitting down, in your chair. Is that rude to say? Daddy says I should think before I talk, but sometimes I forget."
Nora laughed, charmed despite her nervousness. "It's not rude, and you're exactly as smart as your dad said you'd be." "Did he tell you I'm a genius? Because I told him to tell you I'm a genius, but he said that's something I have to prove, not announce." "Sound advice," Jake muttered, taking Nora's coat. "Can I get you something to drink? We have water, juice that's probably too sweet, and wine that I bought specifically for tonight because I don't usually drink wine and had to ask the guy at the store what goes with spaghetti." "Wine would be great, thank you." As Jake moved to the kitchen, Mia circled Nora's wheelchair with undisguised curiosity. "Can I ask questions about your chair? Daddy said I should wait for you to offer, but I'm very curious and also waiting is hard." "You can ask questions. Okay? How fast does it go? Can you do wheelies? Is it hard to reach high shelves? Do people treat you different because of it? Does it hurt when people stare? What happened to make you need it? Can you still feel your legs? If you could walk again, would you want to, or are you okay? How you are?" "Mia," Jake called from the kitchen, "maybe one question at a time?" "It's okay," Nora said, impressed by the directness that adults usually avoided. "Let's see, pretty fast, no wheelies yet, but I'm working on it. Yes, high shelves are annoying. Yes, people treat me differently, and sometimes it hurts. I was in a car accident. I can feel some things, but not everything. And..." She paused on the last question, giving it the weight it deserved. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about that last one. At first, I would have done anything to walk again. Now, I'm not sure. This wheelchair is part of who I am. If I could walk again, I'd be different, and I don't know if I'd want to lose who I've become." Mia considered this gravely. "That makes sense, like how Daddy says he'll always miss Mommy, but he's also not the same person he was before she died. And that's okay because people are supposed to change." "Exactly like that." "Okay, I think you passed." Mia stuck out her hand formally. "Welcome to our home. Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. Do you want to see my room? I cleaned it special, which means I shoved everything in my closet, but Daddy said that counts." Nora shook her hand solemnly. "I would love to see your room." What followed was a whirlwind tour of Mia's space, a small bedroom made enormous by the personality crammed into it. More artwork covered the walls, books overflowed from shelves. A bulletin board displayed photos of a woman who must have been Sarah, her smile bright in every image. "That's Mommy," Mia said, noticing Nora's gaze. "She was really pretty and funny, and she gave the best hugs. Daddy says I hug like her, which makes him sad and happy at the same time. She looks wonderful, and you're right, she was very pretty. You look like her." Mia beamed. "Really? Daddy says that too, but I thought maybe he was just being nice." They returned to the main room where Jake was setting the table with careful attention to making everything accessible for Nora. He'd thought about sight lines, about arm reach, about the small accommodations that most people never considered. It made her chest ache in the best way. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. The spaghetti was actually good. Mia's sauce from a jar approach paired with garlic bread that Jake admitted he'd made from scratch because some things are worth the effort. They talked about everything and nothing. Mia dominating the conversation with stories about school and her friends and her ongoing campaign to get a dog. Because every family needs a dog, Daddy. It's basically a requirement for happiness. "We've been over this," Jake said patiently. "Our building doesn't allow dogs." "Then we should move. Nora probably lives somewhere that allows dogs. Don't you, Nora? Tell Daddy we should get a dog." Jake shot Nora an apologetic look. "Don't drag our guest into this ongoing debate."
But Nora was laughing, genuinely delighted by the domestic normalcy of it all. I do live somewhere that allows dogs, but I don't have one because I work too much. See? Even rich people don't have dogs because of grown-up reasons. Mia sighed dramatically. Being a grown-up sounds terrible. It has its moments, Jake said, his eyes meeting Nora's across the table, something warm passing between them. After dinner, Mia insisted on showing Nora her embroidery work, spreading dozens of pieces across the coffee table. Each one had a different motto or saying, stitched with varying degrees of skill but unwavering enthusiasm. This one's my favorite, Mia said, holding up a piece that said, "Be brave," in crooked purple letters. I made it after Mommy died when I was scared all the time. Daddy helped me with the spelling. It's beautiful, Nora said honestly. You can have it if you want. I make extras sometimes for people who need them. Mia looked at her seriously. Do you need it? To be brave? The question, asked with such innocent wisdom, hit harder than any board meeting challenge. Yeah, Nora admitted. I think maybe I do. Okay, then it's yours. Mia handed it over ceremoniously. Daddy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do stuff anyway. Jake cleared his throat from the kitchen, clearly emotional. Okay, Bug, maybe let's give Nora some breathing room. But Nora held the embroidered piece carefully, tracing the uneven letters. Thank you, Mia. This means more than you know. The evening wound down slowly. Mia eventually fell asleep on the couch during a movie she'd insisted they all watch together. Jake carried her to bed with practiced ease, then returned to where Nora waited. Well, he said, settling onto the couch beside her. Verdict? She's incredible. You're raising an extraordinary human. She likes you too, I can tell. He ran a hand through his hair. I was worried this would be weird, that my life, our life, would seem small compared to what you're used to. Nora turned to face him fully. Jake, I live in a penthouse that's too big for one person, surrounded by things I bought because I could afford them, not because I needed them. I go to board meetings and charity galas and industry events where everyone performs being happy. Tonight, dinner with you and Mia, listening to her talk about dog campaign strategies, watching her fall asleep during a movie. This felt more real than anything I've experienced in years. Yeah? Yeah. They sat in comfortable silence, the apartment quiet except for the distant sounds of the city outside. Through the window, Nora could see lights in other apartments, other lives being lived, other small moments of connection happening simultaneously across the city. Can I ask you something? Jake said eventually. When did you know that what happened in the cafe was going to turn into this? Nora thought back to that afternoon, to the moment Jake had stood up to her so-called friends. When you said you weren't pitying me, you were admiring me. Nobody had said anything like that since my accident. Everyone else saw my wheelchair first and built everything else around that. But you saw me first. Because that's all I could see. This interesting, funny, clearly brilliant woman who'd agreed to have coffee with me. He shifted slightly closer. For the record, I knew in that moment too. When you laughed at my joke about the relationship succulent, I thought, okay, this person gets my terrible sense of humor, which means either we're both weird or we're compatible, and I was really hoping for compatible. Definitely compatible, Nora said softly. Jake reached over, taking her hand in his. So what do we do now? You're a CEO with a viral video and a company to run. I'm a mechanic with a 9-year-old and a business that exists mostly through word of mouth. On paper, we make no sense. On paper, no. But I've spent my whole career making logical decisions based on what makes sense on paper. And you know what? Those decisions built a company, but they didn't build a life. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it's time I made some decisions based on what feels right instead of what looks good on paper. And this feels right? Terrifyingly right. Jake smiled, that same warm expression that had caught her attention in the cafe. Good. Because I think we could be great together. You, me, Mia, and eventually the dog she's definitely going to convince me we need. Nora laughed. How long do you think you can hold out? Oh, 6 months, maximum. She's very persuasive. He glanced toward Mia's room. Fair warning, If this continues, if we keep seeing each other, she's going to get attached. And I need to know you're ready for that. For not just dating me, but being part of her life. The weight of the question settled between them. This wasn't just about the two of them anymore. It was about a 9-year-old who'd already lost her mother, who'd learned to be brave in purple embroidery, who needed stability more than romance. I can't promise I'll be perfect at it, Nora said honestly. I don't have experience with kids. My life is complicated and demanding, but I can promise I'll try, and I'll never be careless with her heart or yours. That's all I ask.
They talked for another hour, making plans for next weekend, discussing how to handle the media attention, figuring out the logistics of two very different lives trying to merge. It was practical and romantic in equal measure. The acknowledgement that feelings alone weren't enough, that building something real required intention and effort. When Nora finally left, Jake walked her to her car despite her protests. I know you're perfectly capable, he said, but humor me. Mia's asleep, and I want 5 more minutes with you. At the car, he kissed her. Not their first kiss, but the first one that felt like a promise rather than a possibility. When they pulled apart, Nora could see the lights of her life downtown, the Lane Corp building visible in the distance. 2 different worlds, Jake said, following her gaze. Maybe, Nora agreed. Or maybe just one world we're both learning to navigate together. She drove home through the city, Mia's embroidered "Be Brave" on the seat beside her, Jake's kiss still warm on her lips, and the terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that she was stepping into something that couldn't be controlled or managed like a business deal. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't having all the answers. Sometimes it was simply saying yes to the question and trusting that the answers would come. The following Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisis that reminded Nora why she'd built walls around her personal life in the first place. She was barely through the doors of Lane Corp when Margaret intercepted her, tablet in hand and worry etched across her face. We have a situation. Conference room 3. The entire executive team is waiting. Nora's stomach dropped. What happened? Riverside. Someone leaked internal documents to the press, the ones showing the cost overruns, the board discussions about cutting accessibility features. It's everywhere. Business Insider, the Wall Street Journal, local news. They're painting us as a company that talks about inclusion but abandons it when it's expensive. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt interminable. Nora's mind raced through possibilities, damage control strategies, the inevitable questions about timing. The leaked documents made Lane Corp look hypocritical at best, deceptive at worst. And coming on the heels of the viral video showing her as some kind of disability advocate, the optics were devastating. The conference room fell silent when she entered. 8 executives, all standing, all looking at her with varying degrees of concern and accusation. At the head of the table stood Martin Frost, and the slight smile on his face told Nora everything she needed to know about who'd orchestrated this leak. Nora, Martin said with false sympathy, I'm glad you're here. We need to discuss how to handle this PR disaster. The disaster being that someone violated confidentiality agreements to leak internal documents? Nora wheeled to her position at the table, refusing to let them see her rattled. Or the disaster being that we're having honest discussions about project costs? The disaster, Martin said coldly, is that the CEO of this company has become the public face of disability advocacy while simultaneously considering cutting accessibility features to save money. Do you have any idea what this looks like? It looks like a company making difficult decisions based on complex realities, which is what every company does. It looks like hypocrisy. Martin spread the morning's newspapers across the table. The headlines were brutal. Lane Corp CEO's public advocacy versus private actions. Disability champion considered cutting accessibility features. The real cost of inclusion. Lane Corp backtracks on promises. Robert Chen spoke up from his seat. Nora, you need to get ahead of this. Make a statement. Clarify the board's position. The board's position, Nora said carefully, is that we voted to preserve all accessibility features despite the cost overruns. That was the decision we made, and it's the decision we're implementing. The leaked documents show discussions, not final actions. There's a difference. The public doesn't care about the difference, Martin interjected. They see a disabled CEO who championed accessibility and then tried to cut it when it got expensive. Your personal situation has compromised your ability to lead objectively on this. There it was. The argument Nora had been anticipating since the video went viral. That her disability, her personal stake and accessibility issues, made her unfit to make decisions about them. It was circular logic designed to eliminate her either way. If she fought for accessibility, she was too personally invested. If she didn't, she was a hypocrite. My personal situation, Nora said quietly, gives me insight that this board desperately needs. I understand what it means to navigate a world that wasn't built for you. I understand the difference between compliance and actual accessibility. And I understand that if we cut corners now, we're not just breaking promises, we're perpetuating the same barriers that have kept people with disabilities marginalized for decades. That's a lovely speech, Martin said, but speeches don't address the fact that Lane Corp's reputation is being shredded online as we speak. The shareholders are calling. Advocacy groups are demanding statements. And you're too close to this to handle it rationally. Nora felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Probably Jake, checking in before his first repair call of the day. The thought of him, of his straightforward decency, his refusal to play political games, gave her a moment of clarity. You're right, she said, surprising everyone. I am personally invested in this. After my accident, I spent 6 months in a rehabilitation facility that claimed to be accessible but wasn't. Doorways too narrow for my wheelchair. Bathrooms I couldn't use independently. Elevators that broke down constantly, leaving me stranded. I learned that compliant doesn't mean accessible, and that compromising on these features means compromising real people's ability to live independently. She leaned forward, making eye contact with each board member. So yes, I'm personally invested, and that's exactly why I'm the right person to lead this project. Not despite my disability, but because of it. Because I know what we're really building at Riverside. Not just housing, but possibility. Independence. Dignity. Things you can't put a price on, though this board seems determined to try. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Martin said, appealing to the other executives. She's making this emotional instead of practical. We need leadership that can separate personal feelings from business decisions. Like you're separating your personal agenda from Lane Corp's best interests? Nora asked coolly. Let's be honest about what this is, Martin. You've been looking for a reason to challenge my leadership since I took over. The leaked documents, this emergency meeting, the carefully orchestrated outrage. This isn't about Riverside or accessibility. This is about you wanting my position. The room went completely silent. Even Martin seemed momentarily thrown by the direct accusation. That's a serious claim, he said finally. It's an accurate claim. And everyone in this room knows it. Nora turned to the other executives. I'm not going to play political games while Riverside hangs in the balance. Here's what's going to happen. We're moving forward with the project exactly as approved by the board vote. We're issuing a statement clarifying that the leaked documents show internal discussions, not final decisions, and that Lane Corp remains committed to meaningful accessibility in all our developments. And we're conducting an investigation into who violated confidentiality agreements by leaking those documents. You can't, Martin started. I can, and I am. This is still my company, Martin. And unless you'd like to call for a formal vote of no confidence, I suggest you remember that. She'd thrown down the gauntlet. A vote of no confidence would require majority board support, would trigger shareholder meetings, would turn the company's leadership into a very public battle. Martin's slight hesitation told her he didn't have the votes. Not yet, anyway. We'll issue the statement, Robert said, breaking the tension. Nora's right. The board voted to proceed with full accessibility features. That's the story we need to tell. The meeting dissolved with uncomfortable shuffling and half-hearted agreements. As people filed out, Margaret appeared at Nora's elbow. That was intense. Are you okay? No, but I will be. Nora checked her phone. 3 texts from Jake, increasingly worried. Hey, saw the news. You okay? Call me when you can. Mia says to tell you she believes in you. Also, I believe in you. Just wanted you to know. The simple messages sent from whatever job site Jake was working cut through the political maneuvering and corporate warfare like a knife through fog. He believed in her. His 9-year-old daughter believed in her. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did, but somehow it mattered more than any board vote. I need an hour, Nora told Margaret. Tell everyone I'm unavailable unless the building's on fire." She wheeled into her office and closed the door, then called Jake. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, I'm here. What do you need?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just, "What do you need?" The directness of it made her throat tight. "I need to hear about something normal. Tell me about your morning, please." "Okay, I'm currently in a crawl space that smells like wet dog and regret, trying to figure out why this person's pipes sound like an angry whale. Mia packed me a lunch this morning that consists of 3 cookies and a juice box, because apparently she thinks I'm 7. And I may have accidentally told a client that their plumbing was having an existential crisis, which I don't think they found as funny as I did." Despite everything, Nora laughed. "An existential crisis?" The pipes literally didn't know which way the water should flow. It seemed appropriate. His voice softened. "But seriously, are you okay? Those articles were brutal. Someone leaked internal documents to make me look like a hypocrite. And they succeeded, at least in the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion is full of people who've never made a difficult decision in their lives. Don't let them define you." He paused. "For what it's worth, everyone I've talked to today, and I mean everyone from clients to the guy at the coffee shop, they all said the same thing, that you're doing something important with Riverside, that it matters. It does matter, but Martin Frost and half my board think I'm too emotionally compromised to lead it." "Because you actually care? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I once had a client insist that crystals would fix their electrical wiring." That surprised another laugh out of her. "Crystals?" She was very committed to the idea. I had to gently explain that crystals, while lovely, do not conduct electricity in a useful way for residential purposes. They talked for 20 more minutes about nothing consequential. Mia's latest school drama, Jake's ongoing battle with a particularly stubborn furnace, the stray cat that had apparently fully adopted his work truck. It was exactly what Nora needed, a reminder that her entire world wasn't contained within Lane Corp's walls, that there were people living full lives without caring about board politics or leaked documents. "I should let you get back to work," Jake said eventually. "But Nora, whatever happens with this Riverside thing, with your board, with all of it, you're doing the right thing. Don't let them convince you otherwise." After they hung up, Nora sat in the quiet of her office, gathering strength for what came next. Margaret buzzed. "The press is requesting comments. Advocacy groups want meetings. And Nora, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." "Who?" "Brittany Chen, from the café." Of all the people Nora expected to see today, Brittany was near the bottom of the list, but curiosity won out over irritation. "Send her in." Brittany entered looking nothing like the polished woman from the café. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup minimal, her expression genuinely remorseful. She stopped several feet from Nora's desk, as if afraid to come closer. "I know I have no right to be here," Brittany started. "After what we did, after everything, but I saw the news this morning, and I had to tell you something." Nora waited, saying nothing. "The leaked documents. That was Marcus. He's been bragging about it to people we know, about how he's exposing your hypocrisy or whatever. He thinks he's doing some kind of public service, but really he's just being cruel, again, like he was at the café." "Why are you telling me this?" Brittany finally met her eyes. "Because what we did to you was wrong. Setting up that date, filming it, hoping you'd be humiliated. It was awful, and I've felt sick about it every day since. When that video went viral and people started calling us out online, I thought maybe that was punishment enough. But then Marcus doubled down. He found those documents somehow and leaked them because he was angry that you ended up looking good in the video while we looked like terrible people." "You looked like terrible people because you were being terrible people," Nora said flatly. I know, and I can't undo what we did, but I can give you this." Brittany pulled out her phone, showing a text thread. Marcus coordinating the leak with someone at Lane Corp. I don't know who, but these messages prove he was behind it. Maybe that helps somehow. I don't know. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Nora studied the messages. They were damning. Clear evidence of Marcus working with someone inside Lane Corp to obtain and distribute confidential documents. With this, she could pursue legal action, could prove the leak was malicious rather than journalistic.
Why would you betray Marcus like this? Brittany's laugh was bitter.
Because watching that video, watching how Jake defended you, how he saw your worth immediately while we were busy being cruel, it made me realize what kind of person I'd become. I used to be better than this. We all did before she stopped. Before your accident, we were actually friends. Real friends. I don't know when that changed, when we started treating you like a project instead of a person, but it was wrong, all of it. There was something genuine in her words, a rawness that reminded Nora of who Brittany had been years ago, before the accident had turned their friendship into something complicated and painful, before pity and discomfort had replaced actual connection. I'm not ready to forgive you, Nora said quietly. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to take these messages and use them however you need to. Marcus doesn't get to keep hurting you. Brittany left without another word, leaving Nora with her phone and the evidence that would unravel Martin's careful campaign. Because the messages made it clear. Marcus's inside contact was Martin himself. The board member who'd been questioning her leadership had been actively sabotaging her company. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Everything okay? That looked intense. Get legal on the phone and tell Martin Frost his presence is required in my office immediately. We're going to have a very direct conversation about corporate ethics and confidentiality agreements. The confrontation with Martin was brief and decisive. Faced with evidence of his collaboration with Marcus, with proof that he'd leaked confidential documents, Martin had no defense. Within 2 hours, he'd submitted his resignation from the board, pending a legal settlement that would likely cost him significantly. This isn't over, Martin said as he gathered his things. You think you've won, but the damage is done. People see you as compromised, emotional, unfit to lead. People see me as human, Nora corrected, as someone who cares about more than profit margins and political maneuvering. If that makes me unfit to lead in your eyes, I consider it a compliment. After he left, Nora drafted the company's public statement personally, refusing to let PR soften her words into meaninglessness. She explained the board's discussions, the ultimate decision to preserve accessibility features, and the reality that difficult conversations were part of responsible leadership. She acknowledged her personal stake in the issue and framed it as a strength rather than a weakness. The statement went out at 3 p.m., and the response was immediate and divided. Some people praised her honesty, others doubled down on accusations of bias. Disability advocacy groups began organizing in her support, creating hashtags and social media campaigns. The story that Martin had intended to destroy her with instead became a rallying point. By the time Nora left the office at 7, she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue, the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting battles on multiple fronts, from defending not just her decisions, but her fundamental right to make them. Her phone rang as she drove home. Jake's name on the screen. Bad timing? He asked when she answered. Perfect timing, actually. Today was... She paused at a red light, trying to find words for the chaos. Today was a lot. Mia and I made chicken stir-fry. There's plenty if you want to come over. No pressure. I know you're probably exhausted, but the offer stands. The image of Jake's small apartment, Mia's enthusiastic chatter, the blessed normalcy of dinner with people who cared about her rather than her position, it was exactly what she needed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Mia answered the door wearing an apron that was clearly Jake's, rolled up multiple times and still hanging to her knees. Nora, perfect timing. I'm the head chef tonight, which means Daddy's not allowed to criticize my cooking, even though I maybe added too much soy sauce. It's fine, Jake called from the kitchen. We like salty food. It's character building. Dinner was indeed very salty, but also perfect in ways that had nothing to do with seasoning. Mia talked about her day with the kind of detail that suggested she'd been storing up stories specifically to share. A boy in her class had brought a lizard to show and tell. Her teacher had announced a field trip to the science museum. She'd gotten an A on her math test and wanted Nora to know because you inspired me with your brain powers. I inspired you? Yeah, Daddy said you run a giant company and make big decisions all day. So I thought, if Nora can do math with millions of dollars, I can do math with fractions. It's all just numbers. Jake mouthed, sorry, over Mia's head, but Nora just smiled. That's exactly the right way to think about it. It's all just numbers. After dinner, Mia insisted on showing Nora her latest embroidery project, a piece that said "Keep Going" in bright green thread. "This one's for Daddy. He's been stressed about work stuff, and I wanted to remind him that giving up isn't allowed in this family." "Very wise," Nora said seriously. "Your dad's lucky to have you." "I know. I tell him that all the time." Once Mia was in bed, Jake and Nora moved to the small balcony off the living room. It overlooked the building's parking lot and a slice of city beyond. Not a spectacular view, but honest in a way Nora appreciated. "Rough day?" Jake asked, handing her tea in a mug that said, "World's okayest dad." "One of the worst in recent memory. A board member leaked confidential documents trying to make me look like a hypocrite. I had to force his resignation. The press is having a field day, and half the internet thinks I'm either a hero or a fraud, with very little middle ground." "Which one are you?" "Neither. Both. I don't know anymore." Nora wrapped her hands around the mug. "I spent 3 years building walls around my personal life because I knew exactly this would happen. That being public, being visible, would open me up to attacks I couldn't control. And then I met you, and all those walls came down, and now you're wondering if maybe the walls were protecting you for a reason." "Yeah." Jake was quiet for a moment, staring out at the parking lot. "After Sarah died, I did the same thing. Built walls, kept everyone at a distance. Told myself it was to protect Mia, but really it was to protect me. Because if I didn't let anyone in, they couldn't leave. They couldn't hurt us again." "What changed?" "Mia did. She's 9 years old and she has a better understanding of emotional health than I do. She told me, and this is a direct quote, 'Daddy, loving someone means they can hurt you, but not loving anyone means you hurt yourself.' 9 years old, and she's out here with philosophy." Nora laughed despite her exhaustion. "She's incredible." "She is, and she was right. The walls I built to protect us were actually just making us smaller, less connected, less alive." He turned to face her. "What happened today? It was awful and unfair, and you didn't deserve it. But would having those walls back really have prevented it? Or would it just have meant facing it alone?" "I don't know. Maybe both." "Well, for what it's worth, you're not alone now. You've got me and Mia and apparently half the internet who thinks you're doing something important with Riverside. That's got to count for something." It did count for something. More than Nora wanted to admit, because admitting how much she'd come to rely on Jake and Mia in just 2 weeks felt dangerous. Felt like building on sand instead of stone. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked quietly. "What if the gap between our lives is too big? You're raising a 9-year-old on a mechanic's income. I'm running a billion-dollar company and fighting public battles. How do those two things coexist?" "I don't know," Jake admitted, "but I think maybe they coexist the same way everything else does, one day at a time, with a lot of communication and probably some spectacular failures along the way." "You're being awfully calm about this." "I'm terrified, actually. You're a CEO who could have anyone. I'm a single dad with soy sauce in my hair. Thank you, Mia's cooking, and a truck that makes concerning noises. But I'm also a guy who really, really likes you, who thinks you're brilliant and brave and worth the risk of spectacular failure." Nora reached for his hand. "I really like you too, which is why I'm scared. I don't want to mess this up." "Then we'll be scared together. That seems fair." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blink on as evening deepened into night. Somewhere in that city, people were reading about Nora, forming opinions, choosing sides. But here, on this small balcony with cheap patio furniture and a view of a parking lot, she was just a woman holding hands with a man who saw her clearly and chose to stay anyway. "I should go," she said eventually. "It's late, and you have work tomorrow." "Or," Jake suggested, "you could stay. We have a couch that's surprisingly comfortable. Mia would be thrilled to have you here for breakfast. She makes pancakes that are more enthusiasm than skill, but they're growing on me." The offer hung between them, weighted with implications. Staying meant integrating their lives more fully, meant letting Mia see her as a consistent presence rather than an occasional visitor. It meant taking another step away from the safety of keeping things casual. "I don't have clothes for tomorrow," Nora said, which wasn't a no. "I have a washing machine, and Mia has about 17 t-shirts she'd be happy to lend you. Fair warning, they all have either glitter or inspirational sayings."
Glitter and inspirational sayings. That's quite a combination. Welcome to life with a 9-year-old. Nora found herself smiling. Okay, I'll stay, but I need to be up early. I have a breakfast meeting with the Riverside architects. I'll make coffee. It's possibly my only domestic skill that Mia hasn't surpassed. They went back inside to find Mia sneaking back toward her bedroom, clearly having been eavesdropping. I heard nothing, she announced unconvincingly. But if Nora's staying, she can use my purple toothbrush. It's new. Mia, you're supposed to be asleep, Jake said with practiced parental exasperation. I was asleep. Then I woke up because I heard voices and I wanted to make sure nobody was being murdered. That's responsible listening. That's eavesdropping. Responsible eavesdropping, Mia grinned at Nora. Are you really staying? Because that means we can have breakfast together, and I can show you my morning routine, which is very organized and includes exactly 8 minutes of reading before school. I would love to see your morning routine, Nora said, charmed despite everything. Yes, this is the best day ever, except for the days when Mommy was here. Those were better, but this is pretty good. Mia said it with the casual honesty of a child who'd learned to hold grief and joy simultaneously, who understood that loving new people didn't mean forgetting the ones who were gone. After Mia finally went back to bed, extracting promises about pancake toppings for breakfast, Jake set up the couch with clean sheets and a pillow. It's not fancy, he apologized. It's perfect, Nora said honestly, and it was the small apartment with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in a child's artwork, where people said what they meant and dinner was salty but made with love. It was more real than her penthouse with its designer furniture and carefully curated emptiness. She woke the next morning to the sound of Mia singing in the kitchen and the smell of burning pancakes. Jake appeared with coffee, looking adorably rumpled in pajama pants and a t-shirt that said, "Dad jokes loading." Mia's making breakfast. I've been forbidden from interfering unless there's actual fire. So far we're at slightly charred but technically edible. The morning chaos of getting Mia ready for school while also preparing for work should have been stressful, but instead it felt like something clicking into place. Nora found herself helping Mia pack her backpack while Jake scrambled to find matching socks. They were 15 minutes late leaving, but Mia talked the entire way to school about everything and nothing, and when they dropped her off, she hugged Nora goodbye like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you for staying," Jake said as they watched Mia run toward her classroom. "She needed that. We both did." "So did I," Nora admitted. She made it to her breakfast meeting with the Riverside architects on time, wearing yesterday's clothes and feeling more centered than she had in weeks. The architects had ideas for how to address the structural issues without compromising accessibility, innovative solutions that would actually make the project stronger. "This is brilliant," Nora said, reviewing their proposals. "This is exactly what we needed." "We were inspired by your statement yesterday," one of the architects admitted, "about accessibility being a strength rather than an obligation. It made us think differently about the problem." By midday, the narrative around Riverside had shifted. Architecture blogs picked up the innovative designs. Disability advocacy groups highlighted Lane Corp as an example of commitment over convenience. The resignation of a board member for leaking documents became a story about corporate integrity rather than scandal. Margaret appeared in Nora's office with an unusual expression. "You have a visitor. He says he's here to fix an elevator?" Nora's confusion lasted only until Jake appeared in her doorway, wearing his work clothes and carrying a toolbox, looking completely out of place in the executive suite and completely comfortable anyway. "I heard you had an elevator issue on the 9th floor," he said with a grin. "Thought I'd check it out personally. Quality control and all." "Jake, what are you doing here?" "Having lunch with my girlfriend, if she's free, though I'm realizing now that calling ahead might have been smart. Do CEOs do spontaneous lunch? Or is that against some kind of corporate rule?" Margaret was trying unsuccessfully not to smile. "I'll hold your calls for an hour." "My girlfriend?" Nora repeated once they were alone. "Too presumptuous? I can downgrade to woman I'm seeing or upgrade to love of my life, if you prefer. Though that might be moving too fast." "Girlfriend is good," Nora interrupted, her heart doing something complicated and wonderful. "Girlfriend is perfect." They had lunch in her office, sandwiches Jake had brought from a deli near his morning job. It should have been awkward, this collision of their two worlds, but instead it felt right. Jake asked intelligent questions about Riverside. She explained the architectural solutions in ways that made him light up with understanding. They talked about the difference between fixing problems and building better systems, and discovered they approached their very different work with surprisingly similar philosophies. "You should see this place at night," Nora said, gesturing to the view from her window. "The whole city lit up. It's beautiful, but also lonely, like being above everything instead of part of it." "So come down sometimes," Jake suggested. "Be part of it instead of above it." "Mia and I live very much in the middle of things. There's a park 3 blocks from our apartment where she likes to feed the ducks. They're aggressive ducks. She's working on a campaign to get them behavior training, and a corner store run by this old man who always gives her extra gummy bears. That's the city too, not just the view from the top." He was right, of course. She'd spent so long seeing the city as something she built rather than something she lived in. Her developments were projects, not communities. Her empire was abstract numbers rather than actual people's homes and workplaces. "Come to a site visit with me," she said impulsively. "Tomorrow, Riverside. I want you to see what we're building." "I'm just a mechanic, Nora. I don't know anything about commercial development." "You know about what works and what doesn't. You know about practical problems and elegant solutions. That's exactly the perspective I need." So the next afternoon found Jake standing in an empty lot in his work boots and jeans, surrounded by architects and engineers in hard hats, as Nora explained the Riverside vision. He asked questions that made the professionals pause and reconsider, pointing out potential issues from the perspective of someone who'd actually have to maintain and repair these systems. "The accessible bathroom designs are beautiful," he said, studying the plans. "But have you thought about how someone in a wheelchair would reach the maintenance panels if something breaks? Or how a blind resident would navigate repairs?" The architects looked at each other, then back at their plans with new eyes. That one conversation led to design modifications that made Riverside not just accessible, but genuinely inclusive in ways the professionals had missed. On the drive back, Nora said quietly, "Thank you. That was exactly what we needed. I didn't do anything special, just asked obvious questions. They weren't obvious to people who've never had to think about those things. That's the problem. So much of the world is designed by people who've never had to navigate it with different abilities. You brought a perspective that was missing." "Well, I'm glad I could help." He paused. "This project, what you're building here, it's going to change lives, Nora. You know that, right?" She did know, intellectually. But hearing it from Jake, seeing the sight through his eyes, made it feel more real, more urgent, more worth fighting for. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that defied logic but somehow worked. Nora managed Lane Corp during the day, fighting battles with remaining board members who questioned the Riverside investment. Jake fixed furnaces and wiring and stubborn plumbing across the city, and somehow, in the spaces between, they built something together. Mia became the unexpected bridge between their worlds. She'd video call Nora during homework time, asking for help with math that Nora was better equipped to explain. She'd show up at Lane Corp after school sometimes, doing homework in Nora's office, and charming every executive who stopped by. She treated Nora's wheelchair as completely unremarkable, sometimes using it as a chair herself when Nora transferred to the couch, completely at ease with the reality of disability in ways many adults never mastered. "You're good for him," Mia said one afternoon, matter of fact as always. They were alone in Nora's office, Jake having run downstairs to check on an elevator repair. "Daddy smiles more now. Real smiles, not the ones he does when he's trying to pretend everything's okay." "He's good for me too," Nora admitted. "Both of you are?" "Good. Because I like you, and it would be awkward if we didn't keep you." Mia said it casually, but her eyes were serious. "When Mommy died, I thought maybe we'd always be sad. But Daddy says people can be sad and happy at the same time. Like we miss Mommy, but we can still love other people. That's allowed." The simple wisdom of it made Nora's chest tight. "Your mom sounds like she was amazing, and I think she'd be really proud of the person you're becoming." "Daddy says that too." Mia returned to her homework, apparently considering the emotional conversation concluded. "Do you know what a denominator is? Because Miss Hendricks explained it, but I still don't understand, and Daddy just makes confused faces when I ask him." They worked on fractions until Jake returned,
And Nora realized with startling clarity that this, helping a 9-year-old with homework in her corner office while her assistant fielded calls and the city sprawled below, was exactly where she wanted to be. Not despite the complexity, but because of it. That evening, Robert Chen called her at home. "Nora, I thought you should know. The board received a formal proposal from investors interested in acquiring Lane Corp. It's substantial. They're offering well above market value." Nora's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Marcus Webb's Family Trust, backed by Martin Frost's connections. They're positioning it as new leadership for new challenges or some such nonsense." So this was the revenge play. Unable to force her out through the board, Marcus and Martin were attempting a hostile takeover. With enough money and the right shareholders, they could buy Lane Corp out from under her. They have the funding? Potentially. It depends on how many shareholders they can convince to sell. But Nora, given the controversy around Riverside, given the media attention on your personal life, some shareholders might see this as an attractive exit. After hanging up, Nora sat in her empty penthouse, the city lights below offering no comfort. She'd fought so hard to keep Lane Corp's integrity intact, to push forward with Riverside, to prove that her disability made her more capable of leading, not less. And now all of it was at risk because people wanted her gone badly enough to buy her out. Her phone rang. Jake's name. "Hey," he said, "just calling to say goodnight. Mia wanted me to tell you she figured out the fraction homework and is convinced she's now a mathematical genius. Also, I may have promised her we'd all go to the Science Museum this Saturday, if you're free." "Jake," her voice cracked slightly. "Something's happened." She told him about the acquisition attempt, about Marcus and Martin's revenge play, about the very real possibility of losing the company her father had built, that she'd spent years expanding and improving. "What do you need?" Jake asked, his voice steady. "I don't know. I don't know if there's anything I can do. If enough shareholders want to sell, then you remind them why they invested in Lane Corp in the first place. You show them what Riverside represents. You fight, Nora, because that's what you do." "I'm tired of fighting." "I know, but you're also really good at it, and you're not fighting alone this time." He was right. She wasn't alone. And maybe that was the thing that had changed. Not that the battles had gotten easier, but that she finally had people in her corner who weren't there because of her position or her money, but because they believed in her. The fight for Lane Corp was just beginning, but for the first time in 3 years, Nora felt ready to face it. Not because she was certain of winning, but because she finally understood that losing the company would hurt, but losing herself would be worse. And with Jake and Mia beside her, she was more herself than she'd been in years. Strong hearts walk farther. Mia's embroidered words had been more prophetic than either of them knew, and Nora was discovering just how far hers could carry her. The war for Lane Corp began in earnest the next morning when Nora arrived at her office to find a formal acquisition offer waiting on her desk. The numbers were staggering. Marcus and Martin had assembled backing from 3 major investment firms, offering shareholders a premium that would be difficult to refuse. The letter was professionally worded, but the threat underneath was clear. Accept their offer or watch them systematically buy out enough shares to force the issue. Margaret appeared with coffee and a grim expression. "The financial press already has the story. Someone leaked it overnight." Of course they did. Nora scanned the offer again, her mind racing through options. She owned 40% of Lane Corp, substantial, but not enough to prevent a takeover if other major shareholders decided to sell. "Get me a meeting with every board member who voted to support Riverside, and contact our major shareholders. I want to talk to each of them personally before Marcus and Martin do." "Nora, there are over 50 major shareholders. Then I'd better start now." What followed were 3 of the most exhausting weeks of Nora's life. She spent 12-hour days calling shareholders, meeting with board members, making presentations about Lane Corp's vision and the value of staying independent. Some conversations went well. Longtime investors who believed in the company's direction, who saw Riverside as innovative rather than risky. Others went poorly. Shareholders who saw Marcus's offer as a chance to cash out with significant profit, who didn't care about company vision as long as their returns were healthy. Through it all, Jake and Mia became her anchor to reality. Jake would show up at her office late at night with food he'd made or picked up,
refusing to let her work through dinner.
Mia would video call with updates about school and questions about whether Nora had remembered to eat lunch.
Functioning as a 9-year-old accountability partner with surprising effectiveness. "You look tired," Mia observed one evening via video, her face scrunched in concern. "Daddy says you're working too much, and I agree. Working too much is bad for your brain."
"Your dad is very wise," Nora said, rubbing her eyes, "but sometimes there are things that need extra work." "But not at the expense of your health," Jake's voice came from off-screen. "Tell her, Mia." "Not at the expense of your health," Mia repeated dutifully. "Also, we miss you. It's been 3 days since we saw you in person, and that's too long. Daddy won't admit it, but he keeps checking his phone to see if you've texted." "Mia!" Jake's protest was audible. "It's true. You check it like every 5 minutes. It's actually kind of sad." Despite her exhaustion, Nora laughed. "Tell your dad I miss him too.
"And I miss you. This weekend, I promise. We'll do something fun. The Science Museum. You promised." "The Science Museum it is." But that weekend brought a new crisis. One of Lane Corp's largest shareholders, a retirement fund that owned 15% of the company, announced they were accepting Marcus's offer. The news sent shockwaves through the business community and gave Marcus exactly the momentum he needed. Other shareholders started calling, asking whether Nora had a counter strategy, whether staying with Lane Corp was still the smart investment. Saturday morning, instead of the Science Museum, Nora was in an emergency board meeting. Robert Chen had called it, gathering the remaining loyal board members to discuss options. "We need to make a counteroffer," Robert said bluntly. "Something that gives shareholders a reason to stay beyond company loyalty." "With what capital?" another board member asked. "We've invested heavily in Riverside. Our cash reserves are committed. Then we find investors who believe in our vision. We create an employee stock ownership plan. We get creative." Robert looked at Nora. "But ultimately, this decision is yours. You're still CEO. What do you want to do?" What did she want to do? Fight until Lane Corp was financially damaged from the battle? Or accept defeat, take Marcus's offer, walk away with her wealth intact but her vision compromised? Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Mia's disappointed about the museum, but she understands. We're making a blanket fort and having a movie day if you want to join after your meeting. No pressure." Then another text, this one from Mia herself. "Daddy helped me spell this. We believe in you. Strong hearts, remember?" Nora looked up at the board members waiting for her decision. "We fight, not with a counteroffer that drains our resources, but with proof that Lane Corp under current leadership is worth more than Marcus's acquisition. We accelerate Riverside, move up the timeline, show tangible progress. We leverage the media attention I've been getting, positive and negative, to highlight what makes this company different." "That's a significant gamble," one board member said carefully. "If Riverside encounters any more setbacks, then we handle them. But I'm not surrendering my father's company to people who leaked documents and orchestrated a hostile takeover out of spite. We prove we're worth believing in." The vote was unanimous. By the time Nora left the office, it was 3 p.m, and she was running on coffee and determination. She should have gone home, should have rested, should have done a dozen responsible things. Instead, she found herself driving to Jake's apartment. Mia answered the door in pajamas despite the afternoon hour, her hair in 2 lopsided ponytails. "Nora, you came! We're building a blanket fort, but it keeps falling down because Daddy's not good at engineering." "I heard that," Jake called from inside. "And for the record, this blanket fort is a triumph of creative problem solving." Nora wheeled inside to find the living room transformed into a chaotic maze of blankets draped over furniture, held up by a combination of books, broom handles, and what appeared to be pure optimism. Jake emerged from under a particularly precarious section, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Welcome to Fort Awesome," he said with a grin. "Please excuse the structural deficiencies. The chief engineer is 9, and the assistant engineer is better with electrical wiring than fabric architecture." "It's perfect," Nora said, and meant it. After hours of corporate warfare and strategic planning, this ridiculous blanket fort felt like exactly what she needed. "Did you win?" Mia asked, settling on the floor next to Nora's wheelchair. "The meeting thing? Did you beat the bad guys?" "I don't know yet. We have a plan, but whether it works, that's going to take time. Daddy says patience is hard but important. Also, that good things take longer than bad things, because doing stuff right is harder than doing stuff wrong. Mia paused. I'm paraphrasing. He said it with more words. Jake sat down on the couch, studying Nora's face. You look exhausted. When's the last time you slept? I slept. More than 4 hours? Sleep is overrated. That's what I said last month when I had 3 emergency repair calls in one night. You told me I was being ridiculous and needed to take care of myself, so I'm returning the favor. He was right, of course. Nora had barely slept in days, running on adrenaline and anxiety. But stopping felt dangerous, like if she paused for even a moment, everything would fall apart. I can't stop now. There's too much. There's always too much, Jake interrupted gently. But you're not going to save your company by running yourself into the ground. Trust me, I learned this lesson the hard way after Sarah died. I thought if I just worked hard enough, stayed busy enough, I could outrun the grief and the fear and all of it. All I did was exhaust myself and become less effective at everything. Mia nodded seriously. It's true. He made very bad macaroni during that time. Like, really bad. We're talking inedible. My macaroni wasn't that bad, Jake protested. Daddy, you forgot to add water. It was pasta-shaped rocks. Despite everything, Nora laughed. The image of Jake serving his daughter rocks for dinner, both of them trying to navigate grief in daily life, was both heartbreaking and somehow reassuring. They'd survived that. They'd figured it out. Maybe she could figure this out too. Okay, she conceded. Maybe I could use a break. Excellent, Mia jumped up. Movie time. We're watching something with talking animals because that's my fort, my rules. You can nap if you want. Daddy always naps during movies and pretends he was resting his eyes. They settled into the blanket fort, Nora transferring from her wheelchair to sit on cushions on the floor, Jake beside her, Mia stretched out in front of them. The movie was indeed about talking animals, something animated and cheerful that required zero mental energy. Halfway through, Nora felt her eyes growing heavy. She woke up 2 hours later, her head on Jake's shoulder, Mia asleep against her other side. The movie had long since ended, replaced by the quiet hum of the city outside. Jake was awake, his arm around her, reading something on his phone with his free hand. Hey, he said softly when he noticed she'd woken. Feel better? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep. Don't apologize. You needed it. He set down his phone. I was reading about the acquisition attempt. The business articles are, well, they're not great. A lot of speculation about whether you can pull this off. Honest assessment. Some people think you're fighting a losing battle. Others think Marcus and Martin are underestimating you. A few disability advocates are framing this as a test case for whether disabled leadership can survive corporate challenges. He paused. No pressure or anything? Nora carefully extracted herself from Mia without waking her. It shouldn't be a test case. It should just be a business decision. But everything about my leadership gets filtered through my disability. If I succeed, it's inspirational. If I fail, it's proof that being in a wheelchair makes me unfit to lead. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's reality. She looked at Mia, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to adult complications. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, fighting this hard for Lane Corp when I could walk away, take the money, focus on other things, spend more time with you and Mia, have an actual life instead of just work. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you something? And I don't want you to take this the wrong way. Okay? When Sarah was in the hospital in those final weeks, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let my death become your excuse for not living." She was worried I'd use grief as a reason to shrink my life, to play it safe, to stop taking risks. His voice was rough with emotion. At the time, I thought she meant dating again, or pursuing dreams, or typical stuff. But I think she meant something bigger. She meant don't use tragedy, or fear, or difficulty as permission to become less than you're capable of being. What are you saying? I'm saying yes, you could walk away from Lane Corp, take Marcus's money, spend more time with us, have an easier life. And if that's genuinely what you want, I'll support you completely. But I don't think that is what you want. I think you want to fight for Riverside, for the kind of company Lane Corp could be under your leadership, for proving that your way of doing business with integrity and innovation and genuine care for accessibility is not just viable but valuable. But what if I fail? Then you fail, but at least you'll have tried. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd fought harder. He took her hand. Mia and I will still be here either way. Win or lose, you're not going to lose us. That's not conditional on your success. The certainty in his voice made Nora's throat tight. She'd spent so long being valued for her achievements, her position, her company's performance. The idea that someone would stick around regardless, that Jake and Mia's affection wasn't tied to her winning this battle, was almost harder to accept than the acquisition threat. I'm not used to that, she admitted quietly. Unconditional anything. We'll get used to it. Because Mia's already planning your birthday party in 6 months. She asked me when it was last week, and I'm pretty sure she's decided you're permanent. So unless you're planning to break a 9-year-old's heart, you're stuck with us. I can think of worse fates. They talked quietly for another hour, Nora explaining her strategy for Riverside, Jake offering the perspective of someone completely outside the corporate world. His questions were practical, about timelines and community impact, and whether the designs would actually work for real people. They were exactly the questions she needed to be asking. Sunday morning, Nora woke in Jake's apartment. She'd stayed in Mia's room while Mia bunked with Jake, to the sound of breakfast chaos and Mia's off-key singing. She joined them to find pancakes in progress, only slightly burned this time. "Success!" Mia announced. "I'm getting better. Daddy says by the time I'm 10, I'll be a master chef." "I said you'd be better at not setting off the smoke alarm," Jake corrected. "Master Chef might be optimistic." They spent the morning at the park Mia had mentioned, the one with aggressive ducks and an old man who ran the corner store. Nora found herself relaxed in a way she rarely allowed, watching Mia chase ducks while Jake sat beside her on a bench, their hands linked. "This is what normal people do on Sundays," Jake observed. "Parks and ducks and no corporate warfare." "I'm not sure I remember how to be normal." "You're doing fine, though you did check your email 3 times in the last 10 minutes. Nora looked down at her phone, guilty. "Sorry, force of habit." "Don't apologize, just try to be here, fully here. Everything else can wait an hour." So Nora put her phone away and tried to be fully present. She watched Mia attempt to organize the ducks into a straight line, a futile effort the girl pursued with admirable determination. She listened to Jake talk about his plan to expand his repair business, maybe hire an apprentice, build something sustainable. She breathed in the autumn air and felt, for just a moment, like everything might actually be okay. That moment lasted until Monday morning, when the next crisis hit. A video surfaced online, footage from the café, but different from the original viral video. This one had been edited, manipulated to make it look like Jake had known about Nora's identity all along. The editing was clever, cutting together moments to suggest the whole thing had been staged for publicity. The caption read, "CEO uses fake blind date for disability sympathy, the real story." The video was everywhere within hours. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with theories. Suddenly, people who'd been supportive were questioning everything. Had the whole cafe incident been manufactured? Was Jake a paid actor? Was Nora exploiting disability rights movements for corporate gain? Margaret found Nora in her office, staring at her computer screen in disbelief. "It's fake, obviously, but people are believing it. How is this possible? Who would—" But Nora knew. Marcus. This had his fingerprints all over it. Unable to win through legitimate acquisition, he was resorting to character assassination. Her phone rang. Jake's name. "I'm seeing it," he said without preamble. "The video. People are calling me, asking for comments. One reporter showed up at a job site wanting to know how much you paid me to play your boyfriend." "Jake, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to get dragged into this. I know you didn't, and I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you and about Mia. She's going to hear about this at school. Kids talk, parents gossip. How do I explain to a 9-year-old that sometimes people lie to hurt other people?" Nora felt the weight of guilt settle onto her shoulders. This was exactly what she'd feared, that letting Jake and Mia into her life would expose them to the ugliness of her world. Maybe we should take a break. Just until this settles down. I don't want Mia to be hurt because of me."
The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. When Jake finally spoke, his voice was careful. Is that what you want? To take a break? No, but I don't want to hurt your daughter. Nora, Mia's going to encounter ugliness in the world regardless. That's part of growing up, unfortunately. But running away from someone she cares about because things got difficult? That would hurt her more than any gossip. He paused. Unless you genuinely want distance, then that's different. But if you're suggesting a break because you think you're protecting us, that's not your call to make alone. He was right. Nora realized she'd been making the same mistake she always made, assuming she had to handle everything alone, that protecting people meant pushing them away rather than letting them stand beside her. I don't want distance, she admitted. I'm just scared. This is getting uglier than I anticipated. Then we deal with it together. Mia's tougher than you think. So am I. We've survived worse than some internet trolls and manipulated videos. That afternoon, Nora did something she'd never done before. She held a press conference, not to address business matters, but to address the video directly. Sitting, in front of dozens of reporters, she told the truth simply and clearly. The video circulating online is manipulated. Jake Turner and I met on a blind date arranged by people I thought were friends. We didn't know each other beforehand. What happened at that cafe was real, both the cruelty of the setup and the kindness Jake showed in response. Everything since then has been real too. I'm not going to dissect my personal life for public consumption, but I will say this. The people trying to discredit me are the same people attempting a hostile takeover of my company. This character assassination is part of a larger pattern of trying to remove me from leadership. I'm not going anywhere. The questions that followed were brutal, invasive, exactly what she'd expected. But Nora answered them with the same directness she'd brought to business decisions, refusing to be defensive or apologetic. Afterwards, Robert Chen pulled her aside. That was risky. Personal press conferences rarely end well. I'm tired of letting other people control the narrative. Let them see me defending myself and the people I care about. If that's risky, so be it. The press conference did exactly what she'd hoped. It shifted the conversation from speculation to fact. Tech experts analyzed the edited video and confirmed the manipulation. Journalists who'd been skeptical started questioning Marcus's tactics. And crucially, several major shareholders called to express their support, disturbed by the increasingly nasty campaign against her. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. 3 days after her press conference, disability advocacy organizations across the country issued a joint statement. They'd been watching the acquisition battle, had analyzed both Lane Corp's track record on accessibility and Marcus Webb's history with disability issues. Their statement was unequivocal. Lane Corp, under Nora's leadership, represented meaningful progress on accessibility, while Marcus's business history showed consistent disregard for disability rights. They urged shareholders to reject the acquisition and called on the business community to recognize disability leadership as a strength rather than a liability. The statement was picked up by major news outlets. Prominent disabled activists went on television to discuss Nora's leadership. Viral social media threads highlighted the difference between performative inclusion and genuine accessibility in corporate culture. Within 48 hours, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Margaret appeared in Nora's office with actual good news for the first time in weeks. 3 major shareholders just called. They're rejecting Marcus's offer. They said, and I quote, "We'd rather invest in vision than vindictiveness." Nora felt something unclench in her chest. 3? 3. Which, combined with your shares and Robert's block, gives us controlling interest. Marcus can keep trying, but unless he finds significantly more backing, the hostile takeover is effectively dead. For the first time since this battle began, Nora let herself believe she might actually win. Not just survive, but win. Keep Lane Corp. Push forward with Riverside. Prove that her way of leading was not just viable, but valuable. She called Jake immediately. We might have done it. We might have actually done it. That's amazing. See, I told you, strong hearts walk farther. Is Mia there? I want to tell her too. She's at school, but she's going to be thrilled. She's been very stressed about this in her 9-year-old way. She made you a support embroidery that says, "Winners never quit,"
but was worried about giving it to you in case you thought she was being presumptuous about the outcome. Tell her I want that embroidery immediately, and tell her—" Nora paused, emotion suddenly catching in her throat. "Tell her thank you for believing in me, both of you. I couldn't have done this without that." "You could have, but we're glad you didn't have to." The final board meeting happened on a Friday afternoon. Marcus had requested permission to address the board one last time, a formality Nora couldn't refuse without seeming petty. She sat at the head of the table, Robert on her right, other loyal board members arrayed around her, and waited. Marcus entered with Martin at his side, both men wearing expressions that suggested they knew they'd lost but weren't ready to admit it. The presentation Marcus made was polished, professional, full of statistics about shareholder value and market position and growth potential under new leadership. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Nora spoke. "That was an impressive presentation, Marcus. Professional, well-researched, exactly the kind of pitch that works in most boardrooms. But this isn't most boardrooms. This is Lane Corp, a company built by my father on principles that go beyond profit margins. Yes, we care about shareholder value, but we also care about community impact, about innovation that serves people rather than just enriching investors, about building things that last because they matter." She pulled up her own presentation, images of Riverside, testimonials from disability advocates, projections showing long-term value of accessible design. "You asked shareholders to choose between vision and vindictiveness. They chose vision. You tried to paint me as too personally invested to lead objectively. They recognized that personal investment makes me more qualified, not less. You attempted to destroy my credibility with manipulated videos and character assassination. All you did was prove that your way of doing business, cutting corners, exploiting vulnerabilities, prioritizing short-term gain over long-term integrity, is exactly what Lane Corp stands against." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is. You don't have the shares, you don't have the support, and you don't have the moral authority to challenge Lane Corp's direction." Nora leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to withdraw your acquisition offer. You're going to issue a statement acknowledging that the edited video was created by parties associated with your campaign, and you're going to leave Lane Corp alone. In exchange, I won't pursue legal action for the document leak, the defamation, or the corporate espionage." "That's— you can't— I can, and I am. You lost, Marcus. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left." The meeting ended with Marcus and Martin retreating, defeated. The remaining board members congratulated Nora, relief evident in their faces. Robert stayed after the others left. "Your father would have been proud," he said quietly. "Not just because you won, but because of how you won, with integrity intact." "I had help, a lot of help. The best leaders always do." That evening, Nora drove directly to Jake's apartment, where she knew Mia would be waiting. The little girl answered the door, already jumping up and down. "Daddy told me. You won. You beat the bad guys." "We won," Nora corrected, pulling her into a hug. "This was a team effort." They celebrated with pizza and sparkling cider that Mia insisted on calling champagne. Jake made a toast to strong hearts and stubborn determination, and proving that sometimes the good guys actually do win. Mia made a toast to Nora for being awesome, and also for helping me understand fractions. Nora made a toast to the two people who reminded me that work isn't everything, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let people love you. Later, after Mia was asleep, Jake and Nora sat on the balcony in comfortable silence. The city sprawled below them, lights flickering in windows where other people were living their own complicated lives. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "You've saved your company. Riverside is moving forward. Marcus is defeated. What's the next challenge?" "Honestly, I'm looking forward to having fewer challenges for a while. Just running a company without constant crisis would be nice." "Sounds boring." "Sounds perfect." He took her hand. "There is one challenge you haven't addressed, though." "What's that?" "Mia's birthday is next month. She's planning something she's calling a friend-family party, which apparently means her school friends and also us, the family part. She's very nervous about asking if you'll come because she doesn't want to pressure you, but she really, really wants you there."
The fact that Mia considered her family, that this 9-year-old was nervous about whether Nora would show up to her birthday party, made something shift in Nora's chest. This was it. The real commitment. The true integration of their lives. Not just dating Jake, but being part of Mia's life in a way that mattered. Of course I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it. Good. Because between you and me, she's already planned that you'll sit next to her dad at the table. She's very strategic about seating arrangements. I wonder where she gets that from. Complete mystery. They sat together as the evening deepened into night, talking about everything and nothing. Mia's birthday plans, Riverside's next phase, Jake's idea to hire an apprentice, small domestic conversations that felt more significant than any board meeting. At some point, Nora realized she'd been holding her breath for weeks, waiting for disaster, expecting everything to fall apart. But sitting here with Jake, in this modest apartment that had become more home than her penthouse, she finally let herself exhale. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have both. The career that challenged her and the life that fulfilled her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not running. When things got ugly, when I gave you every reason to walk away, you stayed. Where else would I go?" Jake smiled. "Besides, Mia would never forgive me if I let you get away. She's already planning your future wedding in disturbing detail. Apparently there will be ducks involved. Don't ask me how, she hasn't explained that part yet." "Ducks?" "She's very committed to the duck theme. I've learned not to question her artistic vision." Nora laughed, the sound free and genuine in a way that felt like coming home. Whatever came next, Riverside's completion, Lane Corp's future, the ongoing work of proving that disabled leadership was valuable leadership, she would face it with these people beside her. Not behind her, not carrying her, but beside her as equals in the complicated business of building a life. Strong hearts walk farther. And Nora was discovering that the farthest distance wasn't measured in miles or achievements, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to accept help, to believe that she deserved love not for what she accomplished, but for who she was. She'd walked farther than she ever imagined possible. And she was just getting started. 6 months later, Nora stood at the entrance of what would soon be the Riverside Development's community center, watching construction crews put finishing touches on a building that had almost never existed. The space was flooded with morning light through floor-to-ceiling windows, the doorways wide enough for 2 wheelchairs to pass comfortably. The design elegant in its functionality. It was everything she'd envisioned and fought for, made real in steel and glass and determination. "Pretty incredible, isn't it?" Robert Chen had appeared beside her, his own hard hat slightly askew. 6 months ago, we weren't sure this project would survive. Now look at it. "Now look at it," Nora echoed, emotion thick in her voice. Riverside had become more than just a development. It was proof that accessible design could be beautiful, that inclusion could be profitable, that her vision for Lane Corp was not just idealistic dreaming, but practical reality. Margaret approached with her ever-present tablet. "The press is arriving for the preview tour. Mayor's office confirmed she'll be here. And Nora, Jake just texted. He and Mia are running late because apparently there was a wardrobe emergency that required 3 outfit changes." Nora smiled, checking her phone to find a message from Jake. "Mia insists she needs to look professional and artistic, which apparently means striped tights and a tutu. We're negotiating. Send help." She typed back quickly. "Let her wear the tutu. This is her day too." Because it was. Over the past months, Mia had become something of a mascot for the Riverside project, visiting the site regularly with Jake, asking questions that often led to design improvements. Her childlike perspective had forced the architects to think about things like, what if someone short needs to reach the buttons? And shouldn't there be fun colors, not just boring beige? The community center's children's area bore her influence in every bright, accessible, joyful detail. The preview tour began with journalists and city officials, all of them touring the model units with varying degrees of genuine interest and performative enthusiasm. Nora had given 1,000 presentations about Riverside, but this one felt different. This wasn't theoretical anymore. People could walk through the spaces, test the features, see how thoughtful design created independence rather than just accommodation. A reporter from the local disability advocacy magazine stopped her. "Ms. Lane, 6 months ago you were fighting for your company's survival. Now you're opening what some are calling the most innovative, accessible housing development in the country. How does it feel? Terrifying, Nora said honestly, and wonderful, and like the beginning rather than the end. Riverside proves what's possible, but there's so much more work to do. Every city should have developments like this. Every builder should think about accessibility from the start, not as an afterthought. Some critics have said you're using your own disability as a marketing tool. It was a question designed to provoke, but Nora had learned to navigate these waters. I'm using my experience to inform better design. There's a difference. I've lived in spaces that weren't built for me, that made daily life unnecessarily difficult. I don't want anyone else to have that experience if I can prevent it. If that's using my disability as a marketing tool, then yes, I'm absolutely doing that. The reporter smiled, genuine rather than adversarial. For what it's worth, I think you're changing how people think about accessible design, making it aspirational rather than obligatory. After the official tour ended, Nora found Jake and Mia in the children's area. Mia had indeed worn the tutu, paired with striped tights and a blazer that was clearly Jake's attempt at compromise. She was currently giving an impromptu tour to several bemused city officials, explaining with absolute authority why the reading nook had 3 different height levels and how the sensory wall would help kids who think differently. She's a natural, Robert observed, watching Mia gesture enthusiastically. Have you considered hiring her as a consultant? She's 9, Jake said, but he was beaming with pride. She's brilliant, Nora corrected, and she's absolutely getting a consultant credit in the dedication plaque. Mia overheard and came running over, tutu bouncing. Really? My name on a real plaque? That's like officially fancy. Officially fancy, Nora confirmed. You helped make this place better. That deserves recognition. The little girl's face grew serious. Can I tell you something? When Mommy was sick, everything was hard. Like the hospital was hard to get around, and people were always in the way, and the bathrooms were too small for wheelchairs and all the equipment. I used to think about how, if I ever got to build places, I'd make them better. She looked around the community center. You made them better, Nora. People here won't have to feel how we felt. Jake's eyes had gone suspiciously bright. Nora felt her own throat tighten. This was why she'd fought so hard, not for architectural awards or business success, but for moments like this. For the knowledge that fewer families would struggle the way Jake and Mia had struggled, that fewer people would feel excluded from spaces they had every right to occupy. We made it better together, Nora said, pulling Mia into a hug. Your ideas mattered. Your perspective mattered. Don't forget that. The official opening ceremony was scheduled for 2 weeks later, giving the construction crew time to finish final details. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of last-minute adjustments, media interviews, and an increasing sense that Riverside represented a turning point not just for Lane Corp, but for Nora personally. The night before the opening, she had dinner at Jake's apartment, a routine that had become as natural as breathing over the past months. They'd developed rhythms, small domestic patterns that felt like building something lasting. Jake cooked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nora brought takeout on Mondays and Wednesdays. Fridays were reserved for Mia to experiment with increasingly ambitious recipes that were occasionally edible. Weekends belonged to all 3 of them, museums and parks, and the comfortable chaos of becoming a family without ever formally discussing it. Nervous about tomorrow? Jake asked as they cleaned up after dinner. Mia was in her room, supposedly doing homework, but more likely working on the speech she'd written for the opening ceremony, despite no one asking her to write a speech. Terrified, Nora admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if people don't show up? What if the press focuses on the cost instead of the innovation? Then we deal with it. Jake dried his hands and turned to face her. But Nora, you need to let yourself enjoy this. You won. You saved your company, built something meaningful, proved everyone who doubted you completely wrong. Tomorrow is celebration, not crisis management. I'm not good at celebrating. I've noticed. Which is why I'm making it my personal mission to teach you. He pulled her closer, his hands on her wheelchair's armrests, bringing them eye to eye. You've spent so long fighting that you've forgotten how to rest, how to acknowledge victories, how to just be happy without waiting for the other shoe to drop. What if the other shoe does drop? Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But tonight, right now, in this kitchen with leftover pasta sauce on my shirt, and our daughter probably writing a novel instead of doing her social studies homework, right now, everything is okay. Can you just be here in that? Our daughter. Jake had said it casually, naturally, as if Mia belonging to both of them was simply a fact rather than something they'd carefully negotiated over months. The words settled into Nora's chest like warmth spreading, like coming home. Yeah, she said softly. I can be here in that. He kissed her then, gentle and familiar, tasting like the wine they'd had with dinner and the promise of ordinary evenings stretching into the future. When they pulled apart, Mia was standing in the doorway with an expression of exaggerated disgust. Ugh, gross. I literally turned around for 2 seconds. But she was grinning. Also, I finished my speech for tomorrow and it's really good.
Do you want to hear it? Absolutely, Nora said. Let's hear this really good speech. Mia cleared her throat dramatically and began. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mia Turner, and I'm here to talk about hope. She paused for effect. Before we met Nora, my daddy and I were okay, but we were kind of sad a lot. We missed my mom, and we didn't think we'd ever feel like a whole family again. Then Nora came, and she didn't fix everything because people aren't broken things that need fixing. But she made us feel like family could be bigger than we thought, like we could add people without losing the people we already loved. Nora felt tears pricking her eyes. Beside her, Jake had gone completely still. Mia continued, warming to her theme. Riverside is kind of like that too. It's not fixing broken people. It's making space for everyone to live good lives, to have homes and communities and all the stuff everyone deserves. My mom used to say that the world is only as good as how we treat people who need help. Nora's making the world better. And also she's really good at math and lets me do homework at her office and brings me snacks. So basically, she's pretty much perfect. I'm not reading that tomorrow, Jake said, his voice rough. I'll cry in front of the entire city. Daddy, you cry at commercials. You're going to cry anyway. Mia looked at Nora anxiously. Is it too much? Daddy said I should keep it professional, but I think emotions are professional. Emotions are just truth with feelings attached. It's perfect, Nora managed. Absolutely perfect. And yes, you're reading it tomorrow. Really? Mia's face lit up. Even the part where I called you perfect? Especially that part. The opening ceremony dawned bright and clear, the kind of spring morning that felt like the universe cooperating with human plans. Nora arrived early, wheeling through Riverside's main plaza where hundreds of chairs were arranged facing a temporary stage. The plaza itself was a marvel, completely accessible, with varied seating heights, sensory-friendly quiet zones, and wayfinding that worked for people with different abilities. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was so much better than anything that had come before. Margaret found her near the stage. Press is already here. Mayor's stuck in traffic, but will arrive on time. And Nora, look. She gestured toward the entrance where people were streaming in. Lots of people. Families with children, elderly couples, young professionals, and notably, many people with visible disabilities, wheelchair users, people with white canes, individuals with service animals, families clearly experienced in navigating accessible spaces. They came, Nora whispered. Of course they came. You built this for them. They know that. The ceremony began with speeches from city officials praising innovation and community development, their words polished but slightly generic. Robert spoke about Lane Corp's vision and the importance of accessible design. Then it was Nora's turn. She wheeled to the center of the stage, looking out at the crowd that had swelled to easily 500 people. Somewhere in the third row, she could see Jake and Mia, the little girl practically vibrating with excitement in her carefully chosen outfit. The tutu had made a comeback, this time paired with a button-down shirt that split the difference between professional and creative. Thank you all for being here, Nora began, her voice steady despite her nerves. A year ago, I sat in a cafe on what was supposed to be a humiliating blind date. People had set it up as a joke. Let's watch the disabled woman get rejected. Let's film it for entertainment. They thought my wheelchair made me less deserving of respect, less worthy of dignity, less human. The crowd had gone completely silent. But something unexpected happened.
A mechanic named Jake Turner walked into that cafe and treated me like a person. Not a charity case, not an inspiration, not a tragic figure. Just a person worthy of kindness and respect. That moment changed my life. But more importantly, it crystallized something I'd been thinking about for years. That the world wasn't built for people like me. That spaces and systems and structures all assumed everyone navigates the world the same way. And that this wasn't just wrong, it was unnecessary. She gestured to the buildings around them. Riverside exists because I got tired of waiting for the world to change, because I had the resources and the position to build something better. But here's the truth, I shouldn't have been necessary. Every developer, every architect, every city planner should be thinking about accessibility from the start. Not because it's legally required, but because it's morally right. Because half of us will experience disability at some point in our lives. Because designing for everyone makes spaces better for everyone. Nora paused, making eye contact with individuals in the crowd. There are people who said this project was too expensive, too idealistic, too personal. That my own disability made me biased, incapable of objective decision-making. To them I say, you're right, I am biased. I'm biased toward dignity, toward independence, toward the radical idea that everyone deserves to live in spaces that work for them. If that disqualifies me from leadership, then our priorities are profoundly wrong. The applause started slowly, then built to something overwhelming. Nora looked at Jake, who was indeed crying, not even bothering to hide it. Mia was standing on her chair, clapping with her whole body, her face split in a huge grin. But I didn't build Riverside alone, Nora continued once the applause died down. It took architects willing to think differently, construction workers who cared about getting details right, board members who believed in vision over profit margins. And it took a 9-year-old girl named Mia who asked questions that professionals had never considered. Mia, would you like to share some words? Mia practically launched herself onto the stage, grabbing the microphone with confidence that belied her age. Hi, I'm Mia, and I helped make this place awesome. The crowd laughed, charmed immediately. My mom died when I was 5, Mia said, her voice suddenly more serious. And after that, everything was hard. Not just the sad stuff, but regular stuff too. Like hospitals and buildings and places that weren't made for when life gets complicated. I used to think that was just how things were. That some people got easy and some people got hard and you just dealt with it. She looked at Nora. But Nora taught me that hard doesn't have to be harder than it needs to be. That we can build things that work for everyone. That including people isn't a favor. It's just right. Riverside is what happens when people care about doing things right instead of just doing things cheap or easy or the way they've always been done. Mia held up a piece of embroidery, one Nora hadn't seen before. The word stitched across it read, "Build bridges, not barriers." I made this for Riverside, Mia explained, because that's what this place is. It's a bridge between how things were and how they could be. Between people who usually get left out and people who usually get included, between being different and being welcome. She handed the embroidery to Nora with a bow that was half formal, half theatrical, completely Mia. The crowd erupted in applause again, this time mixed with laughter and more than a few visible tears. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur, the ribbon cutting, the tours through model apartments, the endless photographs and interviews. But what Nora would remember most was the moment after the official events ended, when residents began arriving to move into their new homes. She watched a woman in a wheelchair wheel into her ground floor apartment, tears streaming down her face as she realized she could access every room independently. Watched a blind man run his hands along the tactile wayfinding system, his expression transforming from concentration to joy as he understood how it worked. Watched an elderly couple slowly walking the halls, the husband using a walker, both of them marveling at doorways wide enough to pass through together. "You did this," Jake said quietly, appearing beside her. "All of these people. You changed their lives." "We did this," Nora corrected. You, me, Mia, everyone who believed this mattered." A reporter approached for one final interview, this one for a national disability rights magazine. "Miss Lane, what's next? After Riverside, what's the next project?" Nora looked at Jake and Mia, at the families moving into their new homes, at the city stretching out beyond Riverside's boundaries. "Everything," she said simply. "Every Lane Corp development from now on will incorporate these principles. And I'm working with other developers, sharing our research, proving this is profitable as well as right. Riverside isn't the end goal. It's the template. Some people are calling you the face of accessible development. I don't want to be the face of anything. I want to be one person in a much larger movement. I want to be unnecessary because everyone is already thinking about accessibility, already building better. She smiled. But until that happens, yes, I'll keep pushing, keep building, keep proving this matters. As the sun set over Riverside that evening, painting the new buildings in shades of orange and gold, Nora found herself on a bench in the central plaza. Mia was playing on the accessible playground equipment, her tutu flying as she spun on a wheelchair-accessible merry-go-round. Jake sat beside Nora, their hands linked, both of them watching the little girl who'd become the center of their unexpected family. "Do you remember," Jake said quietly, "that first day in the cafe, when you said you just wanted to feel normal?" "Yeah." "Do you feel normal now?" Nora considered the question. Normal had been her goal once, to be seen as just another person rather than as her disability first. But somewhere along the way, normal had stopped being the point. She'd stopped trying to minimize her wheelchair, stopped apologizing for needing accommodations, stopped letting other people's discomfort dictate her comfort. "No," she said finally. "I don't feel normal. I feel like myself, fully, completely myself. And I think that's better than normal." Jake squeezed her hand. "Much better." Mia ran over, breathless and happy. "Can we go get ice cream to celebrate? Also because I'm hungry and ice cream is both celebratory and nutritious according to my very scientific research." "Ice cream is nutritious now?" Jake asked skeptically. "Calcium, for bones. Science, Daddy. You can't argue with science." They ended up at Mia's favorite ice cream shop, the three of them crammed into a booth clearly designed for people without wheelchairs. Nora had transferred to the bench seat, her wheelchair folded and tucked to the side, and they ate ice cream while Mia narrated every detail of the day with the intensity of someone who'd been taking mental notes. "And did you see Mrs. Patterson crying when she saw her apartment? She told me it's the first place she's lived in 20 years where she can reach the kitchen cabinets. 20 years. That's like twice my entire life." Mia paused between bites. "Also, that reporter asked if I wanted to be an architect when I grow up, but I told her I'm going to be a professional embroiderer/humanitarian. She seemed impressed." "As she should be," Nora said solemnly. "That's a very specific career path." "I believe in specialization." Mia had gotten chocolate ice cream on her nose. "Daddy, can Nora come live with us? Like, officially? Because she basically already lives with us, except her clothes are at the wrong house, and that seems inefficient." The question hung in the air, unexpected and enormous. Jake's eyes met Nora's over Mia's head, a silent conversation passing between them. They'd been dancing around this for months, spending more nights together than apart, keeping clothes at each other's places, functioning as a family unit without officially defining it as one. "Mia," Jake started carefully, "that's a big decision. It's not just about efficiency. I know it's big. That's why I'm asking instead of just deciding, because I'm 9, not in charge. But I think we should be a real family, don't you?" She looked between them with heartbreaking hope. "We love Nora. She loves us. We're happy together. Isn't that what family is?" Out of the mouths of babes, Nora thought. This 9-year-old had cut through months of adult hesitation with pure, simple logic. "Yes," Nora said, her voice catching slightly. "That's exactly what family is." "So?" Mia pressed. "Is that a yes? Are you moving in?" Nora looked at Jake. "Is that an option? Are you asking?" "I mean, I had planned to ask more romantically, maybe with candles or a sunset, or at least without chocolate ice cream on everyone's face." Jake was smiling, though, his eyes bright. "But yes, that's what I'm asking. Move in with us. Make it official. Be part of this weird, wonderful family we're building." "Your apartment is tiny," Nora pointed out. "My wheelchair barely fits. So we find a bigger place. There's one that works for all of us." Jake reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know your penthouse is beautiful and expensive and has an amazing view. But Nora, home isn't about the view. It's about the people. And we want you, wheelchair and all, CEO responsibilities and all, exactly as you are." Mia had abandoned her ice cream entirely, watching them with desperate anticipation. Please say yes. Please, please, please. I already designed how we could rearrange my room to have space for your work stuff, and I promise to be quiet during your important phone calls, and I'll help cook, and— Yes, Nora interrupted, laughing through sudden tears. Yes, I'll move in. I would love to move in. Mia's shriek of joy was loud enough to make every other customer in the ice cream shop turn and stare. She launched herself at Nora, hugging her so hard they both nearly toppled off the bench. This is the best day ever, even better than the Riverside opening. We're going to be a real family. Oh, we already were a real family, Jake said gently. This just makes it official. That night, after they dropped Mia off at home with a babysitter, Jake's sister, who'd agreed to take her for the evening, Jake and Nora drove to a spot overlooking the city. From here, they could see both Nora's penthouse building downtown and Riverside to the east, both of them lit up against the night sky. Two different worlds, Jake observed, the one you came from and the one you built. Or maybe just one world that's big enough for both. Nora leaned against him. I was so scared when we met. Scared of letting you in, scared of what would happen when you learned who I really was, scared that my life was too complicated to share with anyone. And now? Now I'm still scared sometimes, but I'm also happy. Really, truly happy in a way I didn't think I'd feel again after my accident. She turned to face him. You gave me that. You and Mia. You saw me when I felt invisible. You stayed when I expected you to leave. You made me believe I deserved more than I was settling for. Jake cupped her face in his hands. You made me believe the same thing. After Sarah died, I thought the best I could hope for was getting through each day. That any happiness would be borrowed, temporary, always shadowed by loss. But you taught me that loss and love can coexist. That choosing to love again isn't betraying Sarah. It's honoring the life she wanted for us. They kissed in the darkness. The city lights spread below them like stars, and Nora felt something she'd chased for years finally settle into place. Not perfection. Life was never perfect, but wholeness, completeness. The sense that all the broken pieces of her life had been reassembled into something new and stronger for having been broken. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. They found an apartment bigger than Jake's, more accessible than Nora's penthouse, in a neighborhood that felt like compromise in the best way. Mia got her own room that she immediately covered in embroidery and artwork. Jake set up a small office for his expanding repair business. Nora created a workspace where she could handle Lane Corp business from home when needed. The moving process revealed how much their lives had already merged. Half of Nora's clothes were already at Jake's place. Most of his tools had migrated to her penthouse for various repair projects. Mia's homework was scattered between both residences. They'd been living together in everything but address for months. Riverside's success sparked exactly the movement Nora had hoped for. Other developers reached out, wanting to learn from Lane Corp's approach. Architecture firms began incorporating universal design principles from the start. Disability advocacy groups partnered with construction companies to ensure accessibility wasn't just compliant, but genuinely functional. 6 months after the opening, Nora gave a TED Talk that went viral. Not about business or real estate, but about the radical idea that designing for disability made everything better for everyone. She talked about curb cuts helping people with strollers and luggage, about automatic doors assisting anyone carrying packages, about how designing for the margins actually served the majority. The video hit 10 million views in a week. Suddenly, Nora was fielding speaking requests from around the world, consulting offers from major corporations, interview requests from major publications. She became, despite her resistance to the label, the face of accessible development. But the moment that mattered most came 8 months after moving in together, on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Nora was making dinner. Her cooking had improved significantly under Jake and Mia's tutelage when Mia came home from school looking unusually serious. We had career day, she announced, dropping her backpack by the door. Everyone's parents came to talk about their jobs. Oh no, Jake said. I forgot to sign up. Mia, I'm so sorry. It's okay. Nora came instead. Nora looked up from the stove, confused. I didn't go to your school today. I know. But when it was my turn to talk about my family's jobs, I talked about you,
about Lane Corp and Riverside, and how you changed the world by caring about people everyone else forgot about. Mia pulled a paper from her backpack, an assignment with a gold star at the top. I wrote about how my family is made of different parts, but we fit together perfectly. How Daddy fixes things that are broken, you build things that work better, and I'm learning from both of you how to make the world less broken. The essay was titled My Family and filled an entire page in Mia's careful handwriting. Nora read through tears, each sentence revealing how deeply this child understood what they'd built together. "You called me part of your family," Nora said, her voice thick. "Well, yeah. You live with us. You help with homework. You come to my school plays and doctor appointments and boring stuff. That's what family does." Mia paused. "Unless you don't want to be family, I just assumed—" "No, I want to be family. Nora pulled her into a hug. "I didn't know if you thought of me that way, as really part of the family, not just your dad's girlfriend." "Nora, you're way more than Daddy's girlfriend. You're my other parent, the one who showed up after Mommy left, not to replace her, because nobody could, but to be someone new who loves me anyway." Mia pulled back, suddenly looking much older than 10. "Is that okay, that I think of you that way?" "That's more than okay," Nora managed. That's everything." That night, after Mia was asleep, Nora and Jake sat on their small balcony overlooking the neighborhood that had become home. It wasn't as grand as her penthouse view, but it was real. People walking dogs, neighbors calling goodnight to each other, the sounds of life being lived in close proximity. "She called me her parent," Nora said, still processing. "She's been thinking of you that way for months. I should have warned you she might say something." Jake took her hand. "If it's too much, if you're not ready for that level of commitment, I'm ready." Nora turned to face him. "I'm more ready than I've ever been for anything. Jake, I want this. All of it. The daily chaos of raising a kid, the boring domestic routine, the complications of blending our lives completely. I want to be Mia's parent officially. I want to adopt her, if that's something you'd consider. I want to make this family legal and permanent and real in every possible way." Jake was quiet for a long moment, his eyes suspiciously bright in the dim light. "Are you proposing?" What?" "Because if we're going to make this family legal and permanent, that usually involves marriage. And I was planning to ask you, had a whole thing planned for next month, but if you're jumping the gun—" Nora started laughing, the sound free and joyful. "Are we really competing over who gets to propose first?" "Apparently." Jake was grinning now. "For the record, I still want to do my planned proposal. I bought a ring and everything. Mia helped pick it out. It's very sparkly, possibly too sparkly, but the woman at the store said, 'Go big or go home,' and Mia took that very literally." "You bought a ring?" 3 months ago. I've been carrying it around waiting for the perfect moment." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that was indeed very sparkly. A design that managed to be elegant despite Mia's obvious influence toward maximum shine. "But since you brought it up first, here's my official proposal. Nora Lane, will you marry me? Will you officially be Mia's parent? Will you bind yourself legally to this weird, chaotic, wonderful life we're building?" "Yes," Nora said without hesitation. "To all of it. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they sat together in the darkness, holding hands like two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to keep finding each other every day forward. The wedding, when it happened 3 months later, was exactly what it should have been, small and meaningful, held in Riverside's community center with Mia as the enthusiastic maid of honor. The guest list was selective. Robert and a few key Lane Corp colleagues, Jake's crew from the repair business, Mia's closest friends, and several residents from Riverside who'd become friends over the past year. Notably absent were the people who'd set up the original blind date, Brittany, Marcus, and Sarah Kim. Nora had considered inviting them, if only to show how wrong they'd been, but Jake had talked her out of it with characteristic wisdom. The best revenge is living well, and we're living really, really well. Mia walked Nora down the aisle, a detail the girl had insisted on with unshakable conviction. "Daddy's already at the altar. Someone needs to bring you to him. That's my job. I'm very qualified."
The ceremony was officiated by a judge who'd been instrumental in getting Riverside's permits approved. She spoke about how marriage, like good architecture, required strong foundations and flexibility to weather challenges. How the best partnerships honored both individuals while creating something larger together. When it came time for vows, Jake went first. Nora, a year and a half ago, I walked into a cafe expecting an awkward blind date. Instead, I found someone who changed everything I thought I knew about bravery, about resilience, about what it means to love fully. You taught me that vulnerability is strength, that letting people in isn't weakness but courage, that the best way to honor the past is to build a future that matters. His voice cracked slightly. I promise to see you always, not just look at you, to stand beside you, not in front of or behind you, to remind you that work isn't everything when you forget, and to make sure Mia doesn't put mushrooms in anything you eat, because I know you both have strong feelings about mushrooms. The crowd laughed through their tears. Nora's turn. Jake, you gave me something I thought I'd lost, the ability to be just myself, not a CEO, not a disability advocate, not someone defined by tragedy or triumph, just Nora. A woman who laughs at bad jokes and cries at sappy movies and needs reminding to eat lunch. You saw me completely and loved me anyway. You taught me that the right person doesn't complete you. They remind you that you were whole all along. She looked at Mia. You both taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, about choosing each other every day, about building something worth protecting. I promise to keep showing up, keep choosing you both, keep building this life we've created. There wasn't a dry eye in the community center. The reception was held outside in Riverside's plaza, the same spot where they'd held the opening ceremony. Mia gave a speech that was somehow both hilarious and profound, ending with, "So basically, my dad met Nora because some mean people tried to be cruel, but they accidentally did something good instead," which I think means even bad things can lead to good things if you're brave enough to see the possibilities. Also, I got a second parent out of this, so I'm very pro-romance. Love is good, everyone. 10 out of 10 would recommend. As evening fell and string lights came on across the plaza, Nora found herself dancing with Jake. She'd transferred from her wheelchair to a regular chair, and they'd figured out a way to dance that worked for both of them. Not traditional, but theirs. Happy? Jake asked, holding her close. Deliriously, improbably, completely. Good. Because Mia's already planning our first anniversary party. Apparently it involves ducks. I'm afraid to ask for details. Nora laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. Around them, their friends and family celebrated, the community they'd built bearing witness to the family they'd become. Riverside's buildings rose against the evening sky, monuments to the idea that the world could be better, that fighting for that better world was worth the cost. A year ago, she'd sat in a cafe expecting humiliation and found humanity instead. Found a man who saw her clearly, found a daughter who needed another parent as much as Nora needed to be one. Found proof that the cruelest setups could lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Strong hearts walk farther. Mia's childhood wisdom had proven prophetic. Nora had walked farther than she'd ever imagined. From that cafe to this plaza, from isolation to family, from fighting to be seen to building spaces where everyone could be seen. And she was still walking, still building, still proving that love and architecture and stubborn determination could reshape the world. One accessible doorway, one genuine connection, one brave choice at a time. The daisies from their first date, new ones, but symbolically the same, sat in the center of every reception table. New beginnings, the flower shop woman had promised. She'd been right. This was a beginning. Not the end of Nora's story, but a chapter that proved the best beginnings often come disguised as endings, and the cruelest pranks sometimes lead to the most profound transformations. As the celebration continued into the night, Mia started a conga line that somehow became a disability-accessible group dance where everyone participated regardless of how they moved through the world. It was chaotic and joyful and perfectly imperfect, exactly like the life Nora had built. She caught Jake's eye across the plaza. He was laughing at something Robert had said, but he met her gaze and mouthed, "I love you." She mouthed it back, the simple declaration that had become their foundation. The cafe video that had started everything was still online, still circulating occasionally when people wanted to share stories about unexpected kindness. But it no longer defined her. It was simply one moment in a much larger story. A story about a woman who refused to let cruelty diminish her, who built accessibility into the foundation of everything she created, who learned that the strongest hearts aren't the ones that never break, but the ones brave enough to stay open even after breaking. Nora Lane had walked farther than anyone expected, especially herself. And with Jake's hand in hers and Mia's laughter ringing through the plaza, she knew the journey was just beginning. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply living so fully, loving so openly, and building so persistently that the people who tried to break you become irrelevant footnotes in a story much bigger than their cruelty. This was that story. And it was far from over.